This is Audible.
Ink Reunited, a Midnight Ink novella, Montgomery, Inc. Written by Carrie Ann Ryan. Narrated by Gregory Salinas. Chapter 1.
So, should I get a butterfly on my butt or a cobra on my hip?
Sassy Bordeaux grinned at the just-turned 18-years-old high school senior and tapped her finger with a deliciously apple-red-colored nail on her chin. The numerous bangles that adorned her wrists, covering yet still showing peaks of some of the tattoos she had on her forearms, jingled together with the movement. The sound mixed in with the echoes of the motorized needles, laughter, music, and chatting within the shop. The girl in front of her might have been 18, but she still had the baby face of a girl still growing. Normally, Sassy wouldn't have stepped in and told anyone that they weren't ready for a tattoo, but today, she needed to step in. Oh, who the hell was she kidding? Sassy always stepped in and told it like it was. There was no use lying only to make a few bucks for the shop, while the client ended up leaving with ink they really didn't want, or ink that didn't fit who they were, merely who they thought they should be. She might have been the Midnight Ink receptionist, and while most people on the outside thought her job was to make coffee and appointments, she and the crew knew better. She was the first line of defense for the artist's work and the client's canvas. It was a job she took seriously. Even if she seemed like the crazy lady from the streets of New Orleans most days, that misperception by others led to her freedom. Everyone underestimated Sassy. Even Sassy underestimated herself sometimes. Okay, totally the wrong direction for her thoughts. Pushing away memories she'd rather not think about ever again, she placed her hand on top of the girl's hand and shook her head.
Honey, is this really what you want?
She asked, lowering her voice, already smooth as honey, to a near whisper. The girl blinked up at her.
Yeah? I'm here, aren't I?
Sassy flipped her hair over her shoulder. The long brown waves tumbled down her back. Today, she had bright blue streaks in it, thanks to the colored hair chalk she used. She liked changing it up daily, and sometimes would change the color in the middle of the workday, just to make people think twice. The customers who didn't know her, and some who did, thought she was a little too crazy for them, so she fed the fantasy and did nothing to change their minds. Plus, the colors freaking rocked.
What's your name, sugar?
She asked as she led the girl to one of the small couches they had in the guest area of Midnight Ink.
Hannah, and you're Sassy. I've heard about you.
From the odd look on Hannah's face, Sassy wasn't sure she wanted to know exactly what the girl had heard. There were a lot of stories as to how she'd come to work at Midnight Ink. Between being a spy, a lost princess, and a former model who lost her way due to drugs, Sassy had heard just about everything. It wasn't her fault the stories kept circulating. Okay, maybe it was considering she hadn't discredited any of them, nor had she told the truth as to where she'd come from. No one needed to know that, and the fiction was more exciting than fact anyway. Sassy sank into the cushions of the couch she'd picked out for the shop and held back a sigh. Damn, she loved this couch. It was so plush, yet didn't look it. It fit the look of Midnight Ink, with its cream softness, yet strong angles. The rest of the place had wood floors and dark black chairs, tables, and stools that gleamed under the warm lighting. The little reception area, where Sassy could speak with clients, as well as have the artist relax, was her zone, and where her own magic happened. At least, that's what she hoped would happen in this case.
So, Hannah, you've heard a lot about me?
Sassy asked, her tone casual. She needed to get out of her head and into this girl's. What the hell was wrong with her today? Hannah rolled her eyes, then bit her lip, as if she'd thought better of the action.
Well, you're The Sassy. Everyone knows about you, and your connection to Midnight Ink.
Sassy held back a snort at the Sassy. Apparently her name was a title as well as who she was. She was special like that.
Well, I am the Sassy. But that's not the important thing, is it, honey?
At Hannah's blank stare, Sassy had to hold herself back from using small words. Damn, this girl was young.
Why do you want that tattoo? Because I'm 18, and it's my right as an adult?
Hannah stuck out her lip in a pout that clearly said her words were a lie, at least the latter half. An adult? Jesus, they made them younger and younger these days. Okay, so Sassy was only 32. A baby in some respects. But she'd seen enough to qualify her as more of an adult than this squeaky clean teen.
Okay, yes. Ink is your right, now that you're 18, honey. You need to remember, though, that ink is for life. It's not something to take for granted. Yes, a cobra on your hip would look kick-ass. In fact, I've seen a few that wrap around so beautifully, it's a work of art unto itself. Hannah, baby, if you get that, though, it needs to mean something beyond wanting to prove you're older than what others think of you.
From the guilty look on Hannah's face, Sassy had hit the true reason for the girl's bout of rebellion. No use stopping now, since there wasn't a chance in hell any of the artists would lay ink on this virgin skin today. Hannah clearly wasn't ready, and Midnight Ink cared about things like that. It's what made them who they were.
Honey, go home and think about if this is truly what you want. But I want a tattoo,
Hannah mumbled. Sassy nodded.
Yes, I believe that you do, and I think that anything we put on you will look brilliant. Our artists rock, sugar, and they'll make sure you look fantastic. But right now, no, honey, that's not something you need. Wait until you're ready to get one for you, and not what you think you need for them.
The girl let out a breath and ran a hand over her face.
I guess it was pretty stupid coming in here without an idea.
Sassy reached around and gave Hannah a one-armed hug.
No, honey. Actually, coming into Midnight Ink is the smartest thing you could have done. Somewhere else might not have listened to what you needed, rather than what you said you wanted.
Hannah grinned up at her, looking much younger than her 18 years if that was possible.
I guess that's why they call you the Sassy. You know all.
Sassy threw her head back and laughed.
Oh, I only wish I did. But it's fun pretending I do. Now let's get you a card just in case you decide to come back with a clear picture. When you do, we'll find you an artist. But I think Shep or Rosie would work for you.
Hannah ducked her head and blushed.
Shep's the really hot guy with the tattoos on his arms and shoulders, in the corner, right?
Sassy held back a laugh and looked in the corner to where Shep was clearly holding back a laugh of his own. Apparently, he had ears like a freaking cat.
Yes, darling, that's Shep. He's taken, but it's still nice to look and dream.
Caliph, the big bruiser of an artist and Shep's best friend, belted out a laugh, and Hannah blushed even harder. Sassy glared at the man who smiled unrepentant, then let Hannah outside with a clear conscience. She glided over to Caliph's station, the sway in her hips making her look like she was prowling, even when she wasn't, and waved her finger in her friend's face.
I can't believe you just laughed at her. She's just a teenage girl with a crush.
Caliph bowed his head, and had the decency to look a little ashamed. A little. Sorry, Sass. It was the idea of you fantasizing about dear old Shep that got me laughing, not the little girl who needed more time to think about her ink. Sassy let out a breath, then smacked his shoulder.
I would have thought since you found Jennifer you wouldn't be such a clueless brute when it came to girls.
Hey, give him a break, Sass, Shep put in as he sidled up to them both. He didn't mean anything by it, and Hannah was smiling when she walked out of here. Why are you acting like it was bigger than it was?
Sassy blinked and took a step back. Well, hell, she was blowing it out of proportion. All of Midnight Ink laughed and joked around. It was just what they did. They were a family and ribbed each other often. What the hell was wrong with her? And why had she asked that question more than once in such a short period of time? Maybe she needed a break. Or a man. Nope, not gonna think about that last one. She patted Calip's cheek so he would bend down. When he did so, she placed a small kiss on each one, then sighed. I'm sorry, hon. I think I just need a nap. Or to get laid. Stop it, Sassy. Shep narrowed his eyes at her, and she knew he didn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. But she ignored it. Her friends, as much as she loved them, didn't need to know everything about her.
You should go home, Sass,
Shep put in.
We aren't that busy, and if you're saying you need the rest, then take it.
He pulled her into a hug, and she inhaled his spicy scent that did nothing for her other than remind her that he was family.
We love you, babe. You've taken care of us, so now it's time to take care of yourself.
Sassy pulled back and pasted a smile on her face. Damn it. She knew that. Yet the whole idea of taking care of herself was the reason she was in this rut. Okay, so that was what was wrong with her. Shep, sugar, you don't need to worry about Sassy. He grinned, his eyes dancing at her use of third person, exactly what she hoped for.
Every time you talk about yourself in the third person, you freak me out. You know that, right?
Sassy nodded, her hair falling over her shoulders again. She never could make it do what she wanted most days. That's why I do it, Shep, dear. Now get to work on that stencil of yours. And you, Caliph? You left someone sleeping on your bench. How they could fall asleep getting a tattoo, I'll never know. The big man grinned, then leaned down to kiss her cheek.
My hands are just that talented.
He wiggled his brows, and Shep made gagging sounds from beside her. Boys. They never grew up, even when one of them was rapidly approaching the big 4-0. You're a menace, but I'm glad Jennifer has you. Now get back to work. Shep, don't forget that you need to bring in Shay for her next tattoo. Shep smiled the smile that told everyone within a 3-block radius that he was in total love with the blue-eyed woman who needed more ink.
I will, don't worry. She can't have anything on her arms or lower legs because of work, at least for now. But she's thinking of something for her other hip.
Shay met Shep within Midnight Ink when she had wanted a tattoo, and because fate was awesome like that, the two had fallen for each other in the process. In fact, it seemed like love was in the air at Midnight Ink. It had only been a month or so since the last of the lovebirds had found their match. All in all, 8 couples, well, a triad in Eli's case, had fallen in love since the beginning of the year. Sassy liked to think she had a hand in each of those. Well, if she was counting, then yes, she'd help each couple stagger through the murky waters of falling in love. After all, it wasn't all rainbows and unicorns. The best kind of love and happiness came after the parts where the couple had to work for it and find their way. Each of the couples who found love at Midnight Ink had been through their own unique forms of torture, and now looked forward to bright futures and happy endings. It didn't mean that Sassy wouldn't get hers, though. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath through her nose. No, she wouldn't think about that. Wouldn't think about them. She hadn't thought about her past and those she'd left behind for so long that it was now just a distant memory. Sure, the taste of bitterness and regret still settled on her tongue once in a while, but it didn't rule her life, didn't rule her choices. At least, that's what she told herself. With a shake of her head, she went to her station and made coffee,
Sassy didn't make the usual coffee. Oh no, she had a gift with it, and those at Midnight Ink knew it. In a city filled with the most decadent coffees, Sassy could brew with the best of them. See, that was something light and airy to think about. What else could she think of that had nothing to do with pain and regret? Maybe she needed more ink. She looked down at the spirals and flowers that covered her arms and smiled. Yes, more ink was definitely the way to go. She had a few pieces on her back and sides as well, and knew she had plenty of places for more. Who would ink her, though? It had been her goal to get each of the Midnight Ink crew to lay ink on her, and so far, she'd gotten everyone at least once. Rosie had done a couple of sessions with her. As the woman was her best friend, it only made sense. Maybe she'd get Shep to work on her hip. The man knew exactly what to do with curves when it came to ink. She grinned as she thought of Shay. Okay, so maybe the man knew what to do with curves in other ways too. But that wasn't something she needed to think about. Ever. The shop's phone rang, and Sassy moved to answer it.
You've reached Sassy at Midnight Ink. You desire it, we ink it.
The caller snorted, and Sassy smiled.
Desire? Dear Lord, Sass, you are milking it. Oh, Dahlia!
Sassy squealed at her friend and Midnight Ink's client.
I'm so glad you called. Are you coming in for another session with that sexy bad boy of yours?
Odalia and Jacques had been one of the couples she'd helped pair up recently, and she couldn't be more happy for the cop and the bounty hunter.
Since I'm planning on having Rosie finish up a couple pieces, and I'll have to get partially naked to do it.
Yeah, Jacques will be there. Sassy could practically see the grin on the other woman's face through the phone. You know how he likes to get me down to my skin.
I'm sure you like to do the same, sugar. Now let me look through my appointment book to see when Rosie is available. You have any specific time you're thinking?
They set up the time, and Sassy penciled it in for Rosie, who would make the final call.
Are you coming to the party we're holding in a couple of weeks?
Sassy asked, speaking of Midnight Ink's Valentine's Day party. The shop liked to hold parties of their own on certain holidays. Since the whole crew seemed to be in love, this party was only appropriate. It wouldn't actually be on Valentine's Day, as most of the crew would want to be with their significant others. But it was near enough to it they could eat and drink, and for those who were sober, get inked.
We'll be there. You know we love the shop and you, honey.
Sassy opened her mouth to speak, but suddenly came up short. Sassy. She heard the deep, achingly familiar voice coming from in front of her. She blinked in complete disbelief at what she saw.
Rafe.
Nothing for me, then? Another voice, just as familiar, came from just beside Rafe, and Sassy swallowed hard.
Ian.
She shook her head.
What are you two doing here?
She could have sworn everyone in the shop had stopped moving, stopped breathing. It was as if they knew something was terribly wrong, and yet had no idea what to do about it. She didn't know what to do about it. We're here for a tattoo, Rafe answered. And you, Ian put in. With that, the phone dropped out her hand, and her mind went completely blank. Her past was back, and standing right in front of her, in all their sexy glory and determined faces. No matter what she did, she had a feeling she wouldn't be able to wish Ian and Rafe away. It hadn't worked before. It wouldn't work this time either. Oh, shit. Chapter 2. Nothing to say, Sass? Rafe Chavez asked, his words sounding much calmer than he felt right then. He still couldn't believe he was there, standing next to the man who had left him and in front of the woman who had done the same. A decade had come and gone, but right then, in that shop, it felt like mere moments since he'd laid eyes on them. They'd been different people back then, he was sure, but damn it, he was here now, and ready to face whatever the hell he had to, in order to make his plan work. She blinked up at him, with those big brown eyes he once lost himself with no hope of escape. His fingers ached to caress the chestnut tresses draped over her shoulders and curled under her breasts. It was so sassy that she had a couple blue streaks within the mass of waves that seemed to shout she was special.
"You can't be here,"
she breathed, and Rafe held back a curse. She'd been smiling and laughing on the phone, but now looked pale and shaky. He and Ian had done that, yet Rafe knew he'd do it again if it meant moving forward with what the three of them needed, even if two of the three didn't realize they actually needed to do the same. He didn't break eye contact with Sassy, even though he wanted to risk a glance at Ian. If he was doing what Rafe thought, then Ian was also staring at Sassy, at a loss for what to do. Rafe could just picture the man, only an inch or so taller than he, giving Sassy that unwavering look with his piercing blue eyes, chiseled features, and onyx black hair that he tied back with a leather strap. Rafe would have liked to think more about the man by his side, but knew this wasn't the time or place. Now, it was all about Sassy. If they could get her to talk with them, maybe they had a chance for what Rafe wanted. Since Sassy looked like she was about to bolt, he wasn't putting much faith in round one of their plan. Crap. "Sassy?" Ian said, his voice a low rumble filled with the elegant edge that Rafe had always secretly loved. She shook her head once more, then rolled her shoulders back. Well, hell, as much as he liked it when she got all sexy and angry at the same time, he'd much rather have had her not yell. And that was what she was about to do.
"What the hell are you two doing here?"
she yelled. Yep, got it in one. Rafe tore his eyes from her face and risked a glance at the people coming up behind Sassy. Most of the dudes were bigger than even he and Ian, and that was saying something. Plus, their looks of impending death and doom didn't bode well. "Karina, can we talk privately?" Rafe asked. She narrowed her eyes at his name for her and curled her lip. "Don't call me that. You have no right to call me that." While he understood her anger, which he knew he deserved, it took everything in his power not to remind her that she left him. That would be a discussion for a later time. "I'm sorry." He wasn't. "We're just here to talk and get ink. We weren't lying about that." She snorted. "Of all the shops in all of New Orleans, you had to walk into mine?" He grinned at the reference to their favorite movie, then held back a frown at her reaction. The way she'd paled a bit after she said it, he knew she'd done it by accident. He'd take it, however, since that meant somewhere inside her, she was still thinking of him, of them. "Is there something wrong, Sass?" one of the dudes from the back said as he walked up behind Sassy. He put his hand on her shoulder, and Rafe had to keep from yelling at the guy to keep his hands off his woman. He thought of Ian. Their woman. Another man, this one even bigger than the first, came up on her other side. He crossed his beefy arms over his barrel of a chest and glared. Well, shit. He didn't want to get in a fucking fight right there in the shop. He'd had enough of fighting as a teen and didn't want to do it again. Plus, he didn't think Sassy would appreciate it. "Need us to take care of these two for you?" the bigger man asked, his voice full of dangerous promise. Sassy turned on her heel and put her fist on her waist. "Excuse me? Since when do I need the two of you to fight my battles?
I'm not some damsel in distress who needs her white knight to slay the dragon. I'll slay my own fucking dragons.
She glared over her shoulder at Rafe and Ian, or whatever the hell these two are. The first man who'd spoken smiled warmly at her. Sass, hun, we're just looking out for you. We all know you can take care of yourself. That doesn't mean you should. Sassy let out a breath, and Rafe sucked in one of his own, afraid of what she'd say. He knew the woman never liked to be perceived as vulnerable. He and Ian coming in like this and surprising her had been a bold move, and in retrospect, a not-so-smart one. He just hadn't known what else to do.
I'm fine, Shep.
She patted his cheek, then moved to the bigger man.
Thank you for defending my honor, Khalif. Now, since I've made a scene where usually I only like to make my own on my own terms, I'm going to talk to these two gentlemen away from here.
Rafe held back a triumphant fist pump, but met Ian's gaze. The other man gave a small twitch of his lips, but otherwise didn't react to Sassy's words. Well, it was better than nothing. If you're sure, Sass, Shep grumbled.
I'm sure. They're not going to hurt me.
Rafe heard the odd note in her tone and knew what she was thinking. They'd hurt each other all those years ago, but right then it was about overcoming all of that. It had to be. We really did come here for ink, Rafe put in, trying to ease some of the tension. Sassy turned toward them and raised a brow.
Oh, I have no idea that was one of your intentions. Now we get to see what your other ones are.
With that, she moved around the desk, picked up her bag, and brushed past them. That sexy wiggle in her step, causing her hips to sway back and forth. Damn, he'd missed watching her walk. Ignoring the glares from Shep, Khalif, and the others in the shop, he turned to follow Sassy out the door. He heard Ian mutter something under his breath, then do the same. I don't know who you two are, but if you hurt Sassy, we'll hurt you, Shep said from behind them, and Rafe stopped. He looked over his shoulder and gave a slight nod. We don't want to hurt her. Then don't be fucking idiots, Khalif put in. Rafe gave one last look at the men who protected Sassy, then followed the woman in question out the door and onto the street. Midnight Ink was located right on Canal Street, and since it was just getting dark outside, the early dinner and cocktail hour crowd filled the streets. Since it was February, it was a bit chilly outside, but nothing like it would be back in New York where he'd lived for the past decade. Sassy stopped in front of them and turned, her face expressionless.
I don't know why you're here, and don't tell me it's for a tattoo. All three of us know that even though you might have wanted one, it was just a ruse to get me to talk to you. Well, now you've got me, she cursed. For this talk only. I don't run away from my problems, not anymore. So, the three of us are going to go to my place and hash this out, so I can go about my business. I don't like airing out my dirty laundry at work or in a public place, and that's what the two of y'all are, dirty laundry.
While most men would have taken a hit at her words, Rafe knew he and Ian wouldn't. Sassy lashed out like a frightened kitten when she was cornered. Oh, he wouldn't back down. This kitten had claws, but damn, he missed the way she yelled and ranted. Yes, he was a lunatic, but he'd long since gotten over that fact. Going to her home would be a sweet torture for him, since all he wanted to do was wrap his arms around her and never let her go. He wasn't an animal, barely, so he'd hold off on doing something stupid like lie prostrate at her feet and beg for forgiveness. However, that was the backup plan. That sounds like a reasonable plan, Ian put in, his voice smooth as silk. The man was like frost, ice cold, and uniquely alluring to others, but Rafe knew the man would thaw to reveal the fiery passion he and Sassy had fallen in love with that smoldered beneath the ice. Rafe not only had to mend the frayed fabric of what he and Sassy had, but piece together the connection he'd shared with Ian. He'd lost so much 10 years ago, and he'd be damned if he'd walk away now.
Of course it's reasonable, Sassy spat. It's my plan.
She closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. Rafe held himself back from offering to help with that.
I need to stop snapping. We're adults, and I'm sounding like a freaking teenager who lost her Edward doll.
She rolled her shoulders.
Let's get this over with.
Did you drive here? Rafe asked. Though Ian and he had enough money to have hired private investigators and could call up data on Sassy at the snap of their fingers, they hadn't done so. They wanted to learn more about the woman in front of them on their own and be on equal footing. Though where Sassy was concerned, she always had the upper hand. However, that was another matter. She shook her head in response to Ian's question.
I walked. I live close, and if it's too late by the time I leave, one of the guys from the shop walks me home.
Rafe ground his teeth. As much as he liked the fact Sassy wasn't walking alone late at night, he didn't like hearing about other men. She might not have been his for 10 years, but that didn't mean he appreciated hearing about any other men in Sassy's life.
Damn it, he needed to stop acting like a Neanderthal. Since they'd driven together in Ian's car,
Rafe let him decide what they were going to do. We'll leave our car in the parking lot here, if that's safe, Ian said. Sassy shrugged.
If you parked it behind midnight in the gated area, you'll be fine. I have keys and can get you back to your car if they close up by the time y'all leave.
She narrowed her eyes.
Though I don't think we'll be that long. Come on then. I'm right up this way.
They walked the 2 blocks to her place in silence. The tension rose with each step, but Rafe didn't mind. Once they got over the first part, he'd be able to breathe again. God, he'd miss them so much. Not that he'd let anyone other than the 2 people near him know that. After all, he was Rafe Chavez, badass mechanic and shop owner. He'd once been Rafe Chavez, badass high school dropout. But times had changed, and so had he. Instead of boosting cars like he had in his youth, he repaired them and rebuilt classic ones on request. He was damn good at his job, and everyone knew it. He now owned 3 shops, 2 in New York and 1 right down here in New Orleans, where he'd grown up. He'd made something of himself. In doing so, he'd lost what mattered. Now he had a chance to rectify that. After all, he'd made himself who he was, so he would take the chance and make his own future as well. They finally made their way up to Sassy's loft apartment. Considering where she'd grown up, this place was small in comparison, but it definitely suited the woman in front of him. From what he could see from the entryway, there was a living area, a large kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. Every single counter and shelf had something on it. Colors burst from fabric, rugs, and little glass bottles. It would have been overwhelming if the owner had been anyone other than Sassy. Plants littered the area and were alive and flourishing, many with colored blooms. Knickknacks covered the spaces in between, and yet, what Rafe noticed the most was the lack of personal photos. Not a single one of her friends from the present or the past. That was telling, and something to think about later. She set her bag down and sank onto her couch. My feet are sore, my muscles ache from hot yoga this morning, and I have growly man friends at the shop I'll have to deal with later, so let's get this over with. Rafe held back a grin at the word friends. Well, that was 1 point for him and Ian. Plus, he had to block the image of Sassy doing hot yoga. Talking over serious things while he had a hard-on probably wasn't the best idea. You look good, Sass, Rafe said as he slid his hands into his jeans pockets. Ian might have worn his suit and tie, looking like the billionaire he was, but Rafe liked the feel of well-worn denim. Plus, it was what Sassy had always seen him in, so he wasn't going to buck tradition and memories. She smiled softly, even with the pain in her eyes.
You both look good too.
Her hands came up to her face, and she sighed into them.
Jesus, what are you doing here? What are we doing here?
He gave a nod to Ian, who unbuttoned his suit jacket and sat down on the couch next to her. He was ice, and harnessed power where Rafe was fire and intense passion. Sassy was a blend of both, with the manic energy necessary to handle the two of them. That's what he loved about the three of them, and what he prayed they would be again. Rafe sat on the coffee table in front of her. They were essentially boxing her in on two sides, yet leaving her an escape with the third. We've missed you, Sass. No, don't yell. Please. Not yet. I'm speaking for Ian right now because I know he's felt at least that. But baby, Karina, you have to know this. We've missed you these past 10 years. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you and Ian. He smiled at the man who'd haunted his dreams right along with the woman in front of him. We've left things off all those years ago in such a shit way that I never thought we had a chance to fix it. But Sassy, we can. She shook her head, those blue streaks in her hair waving wildly.
No. What we had? That was great when we were younger. Things like this, a triad, it only works when the stars are aligned and people don't give a fuck about what others say.
She looked at Ian with a sad smile, then at Rafe.
Y'all had so much to lose if we kept it up. And frankly, it didn't work because sure, we tried, but it wasn't enough. We were kids who wanted to have fun, and now we're older and need to move on.
It hurt to hear the lies coming out of her mouth, but he kept his face level. She was lying to herself, just as much as to them. Sassy had to know they knew it as well. We're older, sure, but that means we know what we want. He nodded to Ian. I'll let Ian talk about his feelings, and I'll talk about my own. We were kids, yeah. We were best friends from 3 walks of life, and fell in love. Don't lie to me about that. Yeah, we fucked, made love, and had the best sex of my life. But we also loved each other. Whatever we do from here on out, don't take that away. It wouldn't hurt so much now if it hadn't meant everything back then. Sassy, we've all made choices we regret, Ian said. My biggest one is that while I wasn't the one to walk away physically first, I was the one who left emotionally. Rafe sucked in a breath, shocked as hell that Ian would admit that. The man who never showed weakness as a young man had grown up. Thank God. Sassy growled, then shifted away so she could stand.
No, don't do this. I might have been the one to leave the two of you, but that was because y'all had already left me.
Tears streamed down her face, and Rafe stood, unable to hold himself back anymore. He brushed her cheeks, and she pulled away. Don't, she whispered. I never left, Sass. No matter what you think, I never left. He'd deal with Ian in a moment, but right then, she had to know where he stood. He cupped her face and took his heart in his hands by lowering his head. His lips brushed hers ever so slightly as he fell into the memories of what they'd once been. She tasted of sugar and spice, and he craved her more now than he ever had before. She pulled away again and sniffed.
You have to leave, both of you. I'm sorry I left the two of you before and broke everything, but I can't do this. I've moved on, and I know the two of you must have as well. Please, just let me live my life without the two of you. I've done it for 10 years. I can do it again.
Ian stood, and moved to their side. "We'll leave you alone tonight." Rafe opened his mouth to speak, and Ian shook his head. "No, we'll leave, Rafe. Sassy's been through enough tonight. It was a shock to see us. However, darling Sassy, we will be back. Or if you want to see us again before then, we're in my old loft."
Sassy's jaw dropped. You're back?
Ian smiled, but it wasn't nice, more of a determined promise. "Rafe and I are both back in New Orleans for good. We might not have stayed away for our own reasons, and were apart from each other for even more. But now, we're home now, and we want you with us. Take your time, think, but know that this isn't over."
With that, Ian laid a gentle kiss on her lips and walked to the door. Rafe gripped her chin and forced her gaze to his.
"I know it hurts, but we have to talk, and tonight wasn't the time for more than just a few words and tears. I've missed you, my Karina. Don't run away. You'll only make me chase harder."
He kissed her once more, then followed Ian out, leaving a stunned Sassy in their wake. It hadn't gone as well as he'd hoped, but he came away with far more than he bargained for. The foundation had been laid, and it was time to see what happened. He'd come back to New Orleans for his future, and if he had anything to say about it, that future would include Ian and Sassy. Rafe lost them before. He didn't want to do it again. Chapter 3. "Jesus, I can't believe we did that." Ian Steele mumbled again as he took a sip of his coffee. He'd slept for shit the night before, and combined with the fading adrenaline of seeing Sassy, his body needed the extra boost of caffeine. He and Rafe had come back to Ian's home after leaving a fragile Sassy alone to find her strength. Or at least, that was what he hoped she was doing. Rafe had a place of his own in town, but both men had decided if they were going to find what they had before, they needed to remain together and learn who they were now. Rafe had slept in the guest room, neither of them ready for anything more, and both had an unspoken agreement that they needed Sassy to come back to them first. "You know, that's the 10th time you said something like that since we left her place last night," Rafe said as he sat down on the bar stool next to him. "I'll keep saying it until it sinks in." He downed the rest of his coffee since it had grown cold while he'd been sitting there, thinking, and stood up to get another cup. He lived on the black elixir when he was at work, so he knew today would be at least a half a pot a day. Ian looked at the man who had once been his best friend, lover, and potential future, and sighed. He had no clue how he ended up here, but damn, he liked it. Or at least, he would when things worked out. If they worked out. Rafe grinned at him, that sexy as hell smile just as alluring as it had been when they'd been younger. The man had full-arm tattoos that seemed edgier than Sassy's had been. Both sets of tattoos were new to him. The last time he'd seen Sassy and Rafe, the two had some shoulder and back ink, but that was then. Time moved on, and the ink had been laid. Ian had a full back piece, but he'd gotten that after he left Rafe and Sassy. They hadn't seen his ink, and for some reason, he was nervous about that. He told himself he'd gotten the ink to remind himself that he was moving on. Yet, in retrospect, it was so he would never forget those he'd left behind. Rafe stood up and walked behind him, careful not to touch, and Ian felt the pang in his heart at that. As much as the two of them had fallen into an easy rhythm since they'd come back to New Orleans, it had been so long since they'd seen each other that the barriers between them seemed monumental.
they'd been so fucking young when they'd met and thought they could handle a new and exciting relationship. At 25, with the world at his fingertips because of who his family was, he'd thought nothing could touch him. He'd fallen for Sassy, the bright and fiery woman with secrets he'd never been able to fully uncover. And Rafe, the man from a different world than his in almost every way that mattered. While Ian was from old money and sophistication, Rafe had been in juvie as a kid, even though he had a more loving family than Ian's. They'd met when Ian had gotten a flat tire and for some reason didn't have a spare in his trunk. He'd never felt like such an idiot before that moment. His mother later confessed to borrowing his car, getting a flat, and not mentioning it to him. He'd forgiven her quickly because he'd met Rafe that day. They had struck up a friendship, and when he walked into the tattoo shop and saw Sassy manning the reception desk, he'd been lost. He and Rafe had truly wanted tattoos when they walked into Midnight Ink. That hadn't been a lie. It had been a reason to get there, but it wasn't the real one. Rafe had shown up in Ian's New York offices after 10 years of not seeing or speaking to each other, surprising the hell out of him. Rafe and Sassy had been on his mind more than usual, because Ian had been planning on moving back to New Orleans again. Rafe had come with the proposal that they try again for Sassy. There really hadn't been a reason to say no. In fact, it had taken everything in him not to walk around his expensive desk, slam Rafe into the wall, and sear their reunion on both of their minds. He knew it had taken immense strength for Rafe to come to Ian after so long, but Ian had a feeling if the other man hadn't come to him, Ian would have found Rafe as soon as the move to New Orleans was complete, so they could find Sassy. It had been long enough. When they had been younger, the three of them had been as thick as thieves and had fallen into bed quickly. It had never really occurred to him until much later that what they were doing was unheard of in most circles. They had simply been in the moment. He and Rafe had always been bisexual, though they both preferred women, and it had seemed like the next logical step to share each other as well as Sassy. It hadn't seemed wrong then. It hadn't been wrong then. Ian, though, had been a fucking idiot and let second and third thoughts about what they were doing take over his life. He'd let his family's and his own prejudices pull him away emotionally from the relationship that had been one of the only truly good things in his life. They might have been young, but they had it right, and he'd ruined that. Rafe cupped his face and turned his body so they were standing chest to chest. Though they were both wearing shirts and sleep pants, Ian could feel the heat radiating off the other man. They were practically the same height, with Rafe being only an inch or so shorter than him. That meant Ian could stare into those honey-colored eyes and sink into them fully. He'd never thought of himself as a romantic. No, that had always been Rafe. Rafe, with the warmth and smile for everyone he cared for, even with the badass persona he carried with him like a shield for others. Ian, on the other hand, had been cool, remote. He'd always been that way because it was how he'd been raised. He was the only son of the Steel Empire and had the billions to prove it. He didn't even need to work and could let the board do everything for him. But he liked the control, the power from making his own decisions and finding ways to make more out of what he had. "Where are you, mi corazón?" Rafe asked, his voice that sexy rasp Ian had loved once and was starting to again. Ian let out a breath and rested his forehead on Rafe's, needing the comfort even if he wasn't ready for the next step. "Thinking about the past and what the hell we're doing now." Rafe pulled his hands away and wrapped his arms around Ian's waist. Ian only hesitated a moment before doing the same. He rested his head on Rafe's shoulder, inhaling that spicy scent that had always been a dangerous drug to Ian. "It's been a weird couple of weeks, that's for sure," Rafe mumbled into Ian's ear, and Ian couldn't hold back his grin. "What the hell are we doing?" Ian asked as he pulled back and leaned against the counter. Rafe took a deep breath and shook his head. "I thought we covered this before we went to see Sassy." "Then let's cover it again because we just shattered her peaceful world, and I feel like a fucking asshole about it." Rafe narrowed his eyes. "This wasn't all me. I might have gotten the ball rolling, but you were right by my side." Ian ran a hand through his hair and sighed. He needed to get a fucking haircut, but had been too out of his mind with worry about what he was about to do with his life to deal with it. Plus, he knew Sassy and Rafe liked it long. "It's been 10 years, Rafe. We both moved to New York when Sassy left us, and yet for all that time, we didn't speak to each other. Why was that?" Rafe leaned against the other counter and folded his arms over his massive and sexy chest. Damn it, he needed to stop thinking with his dick and start thinking with his brain, or he'd be in trouble. Again. "You never contacted me either, Ian. We wanted to cut ties when Sassy left, though you left us long before that." Ian ignored the slice across his heart, since Rafe wasn't saying anything he hadn't known already. You don't know how sorry I am for putting that distance between the three of us," Ian finally said after a moment of strained silence. Rafe's eyes widened. "I never thought I'd hear you say that." "What? You don't think I feel sorry? You don't think I can admit it when I make mistakes? I fucking acted like I was better than the two of you, like I was ashamed of what we had, because fuck it all, I was." Rafe looked like Ian had punched him in the gut, and Ian cursed. Damn him and his big mouth for speaking without thinking first. "Shit, that's not what I meant." Rafe held up a hand. "You said it, and you never say things you don't mean on some level. You're ice, Ian. We both know that." Ian ran a hand through his hair in a swift, jerky motion. "Fuck. Yes, I was ashamed of what we had, but not because what we had was wrong. Hear me out. You know that a triad in real life is almost unheard of. People don't see it as a legitimate relationship. They think of it as something for the bedroom, and even then, it should be behind closed doors, never spoken of. People don't understand that there are real feelings involved. At least, there were for us." "And by people, you mean your family," Rafe said dryly. Ian grimaced. "Yeah, them and everyone else in my life who weren't the three of us. I was a fucking idiot and we both know it. Sassy knows it too. Jesus, if I could turn back time and fix what I did, I'd do it. I hurt the both of you because I was too scared to figure out what the hell I was feeling and deal with it. I loved you both. You have to believe that." Jesus, he'd never laid it out like that before. But damn it, he wasn't going to hold back like he had before. At least, he hoped he wouldn't. Rafe's features softened somewhat, but he didn't smile. Ian missed that smile already, and because of that feeling, he knew he was already in deep. Did he care? He didn't know. Plus, Rafe, even 10 years ago, being in a relationship with you alone would have been cause for scandal in the world I grew up in. Things have changed for the better in that respect in the past decade. But back then, it would have taken a strength I didn't possess to be honest with myself and you both. I'm so fucking sorry, Rafe. So very sorry I hurt you by pretending I was better than what we were and pulling back. I'm sorry I never introduced you or Sassy to my family and friends from that circle of my life. I've only ever been truly ashamed once in my life, and it wasn't because of what we were, but how I handled it." Rafe closed his eyes, his body tense and unmoving. Had Ian said too much? He knew that whatever happened from the point where Rafe had come into his office in New York to talk about their future, that things would be beyond difficult. He just prayed it would be worth it. It had to be worth it. "Again, you leave me breathless," Rafe whispered. "You should have talked to Sassy and me back then. You know it, I know it, and I'm pretty sure Sassy knew it. We were stronger together than we ever were apart. You pulled away, and Sassy got scared and left us before we could hurt her. But you know the truth is, we hurt her anyway. I might have been the one left behind by the both of you, but I made mistakes too. I never fought for you, never fought for Sassy. I just let it all happen and ran to New York with my tail between my legs. I didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do with my life, so I took a chance and ran away." Ian cupped Rafe's face, startled that he'd taken the initiative this time. He had always been the one in control in the past, yet it had been a long time, and he didn't know where he stood. It would take a lot of trial and error between all of them to find their footing. Ian was oddly intrigued about how that would all work. "We're a couple of guilt-ridden wrecks, aren't we?" Ian asked, his voice a deep rasp. "What the hell are we doing, Rafe?" he asked again. "We're trying to build a future," Rafe said after a moment. "We were young when we found and then broke each other just the same. We're older and hopefully wiser now, Ian. We each have our own lives, you with your business, me with the shops, and Sassy with the family she seems to have made. We're going to have to figure out how to fit into each other's worlds while building our own together at the same time." "I came to New Orleans to make a life," Ian said. "I grew up here and in New York because of where my parents had homes. I made New York my home when I left here because that's where I thought I could do the best business. And I couldn't stay here after what had happened. And I've always had family here, but I'm here for good now because I was tired of running, tired of trying to be happy with what I had when I knew I used to have better." Rafe grinned. "Plus, my mother wants grandbabies and wants them near her, so coming home only made sense." Ian choked. "Grandbabies? Jesus, were they at that stage?" He hadn't even spoken to Sassy other than a few words, and none of those had been the true apology she deserved. Rafe threw his head back and laughed. "Grandbabies as in what all mothers, especially my mother, desire most of all. You and I both know we are nowhere near ready to even think about that. Though, you know, we aren't getting any younger." He said that last part with a wicked grin on his face, and Ian rolled his eyes. "Let's take this one thing at a time, shall we?" He moved away from the counter and went back to his stool. Rafe followed after he poured them each coffees. "Shit, I forgot I got up to get coffee in the first place. Thanks." He took the mug and sipped. "My head doesn't seem firmly attached to my shoulders at this point." "You're adorable when you're flustered," Rafe said and batted his eyes. The coffee Ian had just sipped burned going down the wrong pipe, and he coughed. His eyes watered. "Please, don't ever do that again." He laughed, wiping up the mess with a nearby dish towel. "You know you love me," Rafe said, then closed his mouth as if he'd said too much. Ian put down his coffee and the towel. then stood again so he was near Rafe. He widened his legs, and Ian slid between them, needing to be close. The hair on his arms stood on end as the heat and tension in the room rose, but he ignored it, his focus solely on Rafe. He traced his finger over Rafe's bearded cheek, then ran his hand over the other man's head, the short hair sliding between his fingers. I do, you know, love you. I never stopped. Not really. I love the man you were, and from what I've seen, I love who you are now. I know that once we find out who we are since we've grown, that I'll fall for you even more. He licked his lips, scared as all hell that he'd just laid it out there plain for Rafe to see. He'd never said the words before. He'd been too afraid of what he was becoming to be honest with not only himself, but those around him. Things were different now. If he was going to jump from that ledge, he was going to do it on his own terms and put everything he had into it. There was no holding back now. He watched Rafe's throat work as the other man swallowed hard. He wasn't sure Rafe was ready for the words or the meaning behind them, even though Rafe had been the one to start it all, and decided to give the man some peace, or at least as much peace as he could give. Rafe's eyes darkened, his breath quickened as Ian lowered his head. Their lips brushed and Ian groaned, missing the feel of the other man's mouth beneath his. He licked the seam of Rafe's lips, and his lover opened for him, groaning as well. Ian deepened the kiss, their tongues colliding, their tastes mingling. He drew back slightly to nip at Rafe's lips, soothing the sting with his tongue, then went back to the kiss he'd craved since Rafe had walked into his New York office with a plan. He cupped Rafe's face, needing to bring the man closer. Rafe's thighs tightened around Ian's waist, forcing him to rock his hips slightly at the pressure. Rafe pulled back with a gasp, and Ian trailed his lips along the other man's neck, needing more, demanding more. Rafe's hands went to Ian's ass, cupping him, and Ian rocked harder, his cock tenting his sweats, brushing along Rafe's stomach. Though they'd had each other in every way possible before, Ian knew they were going too fast right then. They needed Sassy to complete what they had, and they both wanted to wait. Reluctantly, he pulled away, leaning his forehead against Rafe's. They both breathed heavily, and Ian had to close his eyes for a moment to catch himself. God, he'd missed the way Rafe tasted, the way his kisses were slightly rougher than what they had with Sassy. He loved both ways, and when the three of them came together, it was always so fucking explosive, Ian could barely keep up.
I've missed that so much.
Ian opened his eyes and drew back, turning to the sound of the cherished voice that did not belong to Rafe. Sassy, he breathed, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. She gave him a small smile, her hands clasped in front of her, the demure pose so unlike Sassy, it startled him. Rafe stood beside him, almost knocking Ian over in his rush. Ian shifted slightly so Rafe had room, but still was touching him hip to hip.
I'm sorry, I let myself in. Your doorman seemed to remember me and let me up.
Ian blinked. He had one of the nicer lofts in New Orleans, and the doorman had been working for his family for over 20 years. Of course the man would have remembered Sassy. No one forgot Sassy. Ian took a deep breath and nodded. Don't be sorry. I'm glad he let you in. He could feel the blush creeping up his neck at what she'd walked in on. She might have said she'd missed it, but did she feel left out?
Don't look like that, Ian. You either, Rafe. I was never jealous of what you two shared, just like how you two were never jealous of what we shared with each other. God, guys, what you two just did? That sweet yet sexy as hell kiss? It meant everything to me. You guys used to hold back with each other at first, and it always killed me when you did that. But to see the two of you kissing and feeling that warmth from it makes me feel like the reason I'm here is okay.
Ian blinked, then walked around the bar so he could be close to her. He felt Rafe on his heels and liked knowing that, as he needed the man's inherent strength that Ian didn't seem to possess at the moment. "What are you saying?" Rafe asked. She looked between them both and took a deep breath.
I'm saying that I'm willing to stop hiding from what we were. I'm not saying I'm ready for a full commitment like what I think you both are saying, but I'm willing to take things one day at a time.
Relief slammed into Ian so hard he almost fell to his knees. Rafe took a step forward, and Ian almost followed, but Sassy put her hand up.
Give me 2 weeks.
What? He asked.
2 weeks, where we just do coffee and maybe dinner. We can find out who we are now. I don't even know what you both do for a living. Not really. Give me 2 weeks where we don't touch, kiss, or give in to the heat we all feel. I want to make sure that we actually like the people we've become, rather than the people we were.
Ian nodded, liking that idea. Things were moving too fast as it was. He was a planner and liked to have all his facts before he made a decision. Though he seemed to have already made one with his heart, the time to think would be good for his brain. "Anything you want, Sass," Rafe whispered. "Just hear us out." She gave them a shaky smile, then rolled her shoulders back.
I hope you two know what you're in for. I'm the Sassy after all.
Rafe snorted.
There's a story behind that, isn't there?
She smiled full out, and Ian went weak in the knees again.
Of course. That's just one thing you'll have to learn.
If it took him 100 years, he wasn't sure he'd ever find out every nuance of this woman, but he knew he'd do everything in his power to make it happen. This was their second chance, and he wasn't going to lose it. Chapter 4. What was 2 weeks of celibacy compared to the months she'd been sex-free before this? Sassy groaned and knocked her head against the wall. Well, considering for the past 2 weeks when she wasn't at the shop she'd been tied to Rafe and Ian, the lack of sex might just kill her. She'd not had sex with them for 10 years. What was 2 more weeks? Okay, so she hadn't exactly been in their vicinity for those 10 years, so it made it easier. But still, she was a grown woman who could handle her urges. Barely. She was a confident, modern woman, so it wasn't out of character for her to take care of her own orgasms when she felt the need. It was just a coincidence that Rafe and Ian happened to be the center of her sweaty, naughty fantasies when she let her hand fall between her legs. Damn it, she needed to stop thinking about sex and everything that came with it. Her nipples were constantly hard, and she was pretty sure her knees would go weak at just the thought of one of the men touching her. She was not a weak-kneed schoolgirl, and she refused to allow herself to become one. In the 2 weeks since she'd walked in on Ian and Rafe in the kitchen, going at each other like there was no tomorrow, no, she couldn't think about the way the two of them had melded together in heat. She had to remain at least somewhat cool when the men arrived. If she looked all hot and bothered, they'd know. They always knew. It had been 2 weeks of coffees, dinners, and the occasional lunch with Rafe and Ian. She had been for coffee with Ian, to dinner with Rafe, and out with both of them too. She liked that they were learning each other on their own as well as together. Plus, she knew Rafe and Ian would want to be together as well. It was always the three of them, even when they had their individual relationships as well. She'd love getting to know who the men were now, though she knew they were going to have to delve into the past again. If this, whatever this was going to work, they would have to overcome those barriers. Barriers she'd helped put in place all those years ago. The knock at the door pulled her out of her thoughts, and she shook her head. After she smoothed out her dress, she opened her front door. The zing that shocked her body just from seeing them never failed to amaze her. They stood side by side, both dark in looks and in temptation. Ian had left his hair down, the sexy black strands brushing against his shoulders and begging for her touch. He shaved because of his job in the high-visibility world of real estate, but tonight, he'd left some scruff that made him look even more dangerously sexy. Rafe, too, had a beard, but his was a bit longer. His honey eyes smoldered as he took in her body, and she held back a delicious shiver. 2 weeks of casual dates with these two hadn't been enough. Today was the end of that time limit she'd given them all. She would hold herself back from jumping them and rubbing all over them like a cat in heat for one more night. Maybe. Ian grinned at her, and she blinked. Damn it. She loved when he smiled, and he didn't do it nearly often enough. "Are you going to let us in, Sassy?" Ian asked, his voice a raspy promise. "Or should we stand in your doorway for our date? I don't know as I'd mind that much, considering I love the way you look in that dress. Those long legs of yours look fucking sexy, and I know they'd look even sexier wrapped around my waist. Rafe's as well." The little moan that escaped her lips didn't surprise her, but the matching one from Rafe's did. It seemed both men were just as horny as she was. 2 weeks of temptation might have been a good idea for her heart, but her body wanted more. Now. She moved back, speechless, and annoyed with herself for being so. She was the Sassy. She was not an innocent little girl who couldn't speak around men. She just happened to be acting like one at the moment. Damn them both. Rafe and Ian strolled into the room, looking like jungle cats with all their sleek muscles. Ian wore a perfectly tailored, obviously custom-made designer suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months, while Rafe was considerably more laid back and wore nice, high-end jeans and a button-up shirt. They were so different from each other, but the alphas living beneath the surface, and sometimes right out front, made her want to tilt her head and bare her throat, ready for her men to have her at their will. And enough of that. "So, what's the plan today? It's the first time all 3 of us have a day off together." Both men had taken the entire day off, rather than waiting for an evening activity. She'd also taken the day off at Midnight Inc., with everyone's enthusiastic encouragement. Apparently, she'd been a little more snippy than usual. It wasn't her fault she was deprived and moody. Okay, so maybe it was partially her fault, but a woman never fessed up to that. Rafe leaned against her couch, while Ian stood beside him, his gaze on hers. "Rafe and I didn't have set plans, other than to walk around the historic district. It's been a while since either of us lived here." He winced, and Sassy felt bad for him. Referring to their shared past was like walking through a minefield. She shrugged it off and walked to the kitchen, needing something to drink before they headed out. "I'm up for anything y'all want to do." And at this point, she might just mean anything. "I'm getting a glass of water. Want one?" Rafe shook his head. If you don't want to head out, we can stay here and hang. I know we haven't had much time to spend together, just the three of us in private. He walked toward her, following her into the kitchen area. She had an open space so all three of them could see each other no matter where they stood, as long as they didn't go to the bedroom areas. It's hard to talk about the serious topics in public, Ian added, and Sassy's hand clenched her glass. Good. They were going to talk. Get it out in the open. It was about fucking time. I've said I was sorry before, Sassy, but damn it, I'm so fucking sorry I walked away when I did. Ian's confession startled her, the blunt words slicing through the lazy morning and bringing her back to the past. They'd already said their apologies, but words weren't enough. They all knew that. What the hell was she doing? This is so weird, Sassy said as she put the glass down and threw her hands up. Rafe blinked, but Ian didn't move. Don't you see that? She asked. We're grown-ass people taking things slow like it's a fucking business deal, and we're not talking about what matters. What the hell are we doing here? Rafe stood and strode toward her. We're finding each other again, he said simply. We're forming a relationship, Ian added. Why are we doing this? Why now? Why can't I just quit you both? The last part slipped out, and she closed her eyes. She hadn't meant that. Not really. Though it needed to be said. Rafe cupped her face in a swift movement, the hard palms and callous fingers tightening with great care. Why are we doing this? He whispered. Because we want to. Because we need to. We were a damn good thing 10 years ago, and I know if things had been different, we would have made something of it. Can't you feel the chemistry between the three of us? Can't you feel the heat? We can't ignore that just because we're scared. That would make us fucking cowards. And you, Sassy, are not a coward. Ian came up from behind her, like he used to do all those years ago. His hands rested on her hips, while his lips slid against her ear. I'm scared too, Sassy. I'm so scared that we'll fuck this up again because we don't know what we're doing. But you know what? We're older now, maybe even wiser. We're going to learn from our mistakes and be together again. It's what I want. It's what Rafe wants. And I hope to God it's what you want too. Hadn't she told them this is what she wanted? Because she damn well did. Just because she wanted it didn't mean it would be good for her. She pulled away, needing air. She didn't like this wishy-washy version of herself, and she knew if she didn't tell them exactly what had happened before, she couldn't move on. When I left you both, I had nowhere else to go, she started. Sassy. Rafe's pained voice forced her to shake her head. Let me tell you what happened first. I need to get this off my chest. Then we can move on. Because, know this, I wouldn't be here with the both of you if I didn't want it. But what I want and my state of mind, it seems, are two different things. Then tell us, Sass, Ian said. I guess I should start earlier. You both know where I came from. God, she hated this part. But if she didn't start there, they wouldn't understand. She barely understood. Her men nodded. I'm the Bordeaux princess. Or at least, that's what my dad told me growing up. She gave a soft sigh. But it wasn't because of fond memories. Oh no. There weren't many good ones when it came to her father. I had everything I could have wanted. Nice clothes, a nice house, fancy schools. We were old money. She spat the word, and risked a glance at Ian. He too came from old money, and merely nodded in understanding.
I was supposed to finish high school and go to college so I could have my degree to put on a pretty gold plaque on the wall of my husband's office, like my mother had. I was supposed to marry the man my father chose for me, who would have furthered his business and political plans. Then I would have 2 perfect children who would be raised by nannies, and I would lunch with other women of my ilk and never smile at the wrong person, and never entertain an inappropriate thought.
That wouldn't have been our Sassy, Rafe interrupted, and Sassy smiled.
Damn straight.
She ran a hand through her hair and looked at a particular bright red streak.
Can you see this up in a bun or me wearing pearls?
Ian cleared his throat. I can picture the pearls.
Her pussy throbbed and she held back a moan. Don't change the subject.
I'll keep that in mind for later then.
Damn the man. Anyway, I didn't want all of that. I'd known it since I was 10, and yet I stayed there under my father's thumb for another 5 years.
She closed her eyes, trying to fight off the memories.
God, I hated him. I don't know if I do any more since he doesn't mean anything to me now, but I hated him then. Don't get me wrong, he never hit me, but he would have if he thought it would have worked.
I'd have killed him if he did. Rafe's voice held a dangerous edge.
Sassy smiled. You know I can handle my own battle, sugar.
Ian ran his fingers down her arm, but she didn't pull away, liking the touch too much. You left when you were 15. I remember you saying that, and thinking you were too young, but now? You were way too fucking young to have to deal with any of that shit. She rolled her eyes.
Yes, I was stupid. I was this entitled rich kid who wanted to make my own choices. So what did I do? I ran away and had to learn the hard way that my issues weren't all that much in the grand scheme of things.
Ian gripped her wrist and tugged her so her body was flush against his. She could feel his half-hard cock against her belly, but it was his eyes that held her. The ice and determination nearly brought her to her knees in submission. That was something she wasn't ready for, and she wasn't sure she would ever be ready for it. Never say your problems don't matter. Just because someone might have gone through something much worse than you doesn't diminish your own past. It's not a competition, Sassy. It never had to be.
She closed her eyes, needing to break the connection from his gaze so she wouldn't melt at his feet.
She rested her head against his chest and inhaled his musky scent.
I met good people on the street, and they took pity on me. I learned the hard way how to take care of myself.
She pushed away her memories of the cold and hungry nights she couldn't forget. They were part of what made her the Sassy. Without that edge, that pain, she didn't want to think about who she might have become. Sassy turned in Ian's arms to face Rafe.
Then your mama found me,
she said with a smile.
I was only 18 and living in a commune type thing, doing odd jobs to make a living. And your mama took me in.
Rafe came to her side and cupped her cheek. I remember. You were all fire and anger, and I knew we'd be best friends. Sassy rolled her eyes, but leaned into his touch, keeping her hands on Ian.
She gave me a job at your father's shop, and I learned how to do something I was good at.
You always ran us up better than even my mom, Rafe teased. She loved that you took up her role as the shop's receptionist.
I loved it too, she said warmly, remembering how she'd learned to live in a family rather than in the cold mausoleum of her childhood. I made friends had a full stomach for the first time in years, and learned to take care of myself without having to fight for it.
She turned to Ian.
Then you showed up at the shop with a flat tire a couple of years later, and I was lost.
Ian kissed her brow and leaned back. It always surprised me that you and Rafe were never together before I showed up. She was too much a part of the family before you were there, Rafe explained.
He's right. I was almost a sister at that point.
Rafe barked out a laugh. Oh no, baby, I wouldn't say that. You were way too sexy even at 18 for me to think of you as anything other than someone who was part of the family that I needed to stay clear away from if I wanted to stay on my mom's good side.
Sassy chuckled, already feeling at ease thinking of the good memories rather than dwelling on the painful ones. Those would come eventually.
As soon as Ian showed up, I don't know. It was like I couldn't hold back the attraction anymore.
Thank God you went all in, because those couple of years living in the same house as you but having to act all good and not into you about killed me, Sassy teased.
Ian snorted and ran his hand down her back, soothing her. His hand brushed against her ass, and she had to hold herself back from jumping him. As soon as she finished what she was saying, they could move on. It didn't make sense to leave everything unsaid where it could fester.
Then, the three of us were... us.
She sighed.
I loved it. I loved you both as a young girl, and I wouldn't have changed that year. It hurt so goddamn much to think about what happened at the end, but I wouldn't change anything about what led us there.
We don't have to lose what we had, Rafe put in.
No, we already lost it,
Sassy countered.
But we can try for something new. Building on the past and what-ifs will only hurt us. I'm already liking the men you've become, and I sure as hell like who I am now. If we start again where we ended, we'd lose everything we've gained since.
I was a fucking prick to step away. I've said it before and I'd say it again, but I think you're tired of hearing it. I won't walk away because of fear. Ian gripped her chin, forcing her gaze to his. I promise. She noticed he tacked on the qualifier to his not walking away, and she put that back for later. None of them were talking marriage, babies, and commitment. At least, she certainly wasn't.
One thing I will say, though, is that if I hadn't left, if I hadn't been forced to move on, I wouldn't have found Midnight Ink.
She stepped away from Ian and Rafe and looked down at the ink on her arms.
I only had a few small ones when I met you, and now I'm inked all over. I love it. I love my job and who I get to help daily. I love the family that I've made. So yes, what happened sucked. God, that's not even a good word for it. What happened shattered everything I thought I had and needed. But I grew up because of it. Each step I've taken has made me stronger and made me sassy. I love who I am, boys, and I'm not going to change that. What I will say, though, is this. Who I am needs the two of you.
At least for right now. She couldn't think beyond that, or it would be too much. Ian growled slightly and moved closer, Rafe on his tail. This ink? His finger traced her arm again, and a shudder ripped through her at the promise of what was to come. I want to see it all over. I want to see everything, Sassy. I want everything. That might make me a selfish man, but remember, I'm a steal. I'm used to getting what I want. Rafe's hands went down her back and cupped her ass. She moaned and rocked into him. I may not be a steal, but I know what I want too. I want you both. What happened is in the past, and we're here now. We're going to move on together. You get me? She turned to face him and nodded. Oh yeah, she got him.
Now you know where I'm at and where I've been,
she said, knowing their time for talking was drawing to a close. Thank God. With a wicked grin, she took Ian's tie in one hand and gripped Rafe's shirt in the other.
I think it's time for talking to be over. I'm not in the mood to go out today. Do you two have a better idea?
She looked between the two men as their gazes heated and a little growl escaped. Oh yeah, Ian whispered. Oh fuck yeah, Rafe growled. This is what she wanted right then. Them, her, no clothes, and a night filled with just the right amount of passion. This. Chapter 5. Sassy licked her lips, loving the way both men's eyes darkened as their breathing became ragged. It had always been like this, hot, heady, and ready for anything. Her nipples tightened and her stomach fluttered, thinking about what was to come. With two men, she never knew who would go first and set the stage. Both Ian and Rafe had always been dominant in bed, but not doms in the same sense that her friends' men were. They knew how she wanted it, and gave it to her, after a tease or two. What she didn't know was which man would take charge first. Ian and Rafe glanced at each other, as if having an unspoken conversation, hopefully deciding on what she'd just been thinking about. Rafe nodded, and Sassy sucked in a breath as Ian took 2 steps toward her and reached around her head, wrapping her long hair around his fist 3 times. She panted as he pulled, letting her head fall back so she could stare at him, wanting more. Mine, he whispered, then crushed his mouth to hers. She moaned as his lips pressed against hers, his teeth nipping at them. She opened for him, his tongue tangling with hers. He tasted of mint and coffee, the taste mingling with her own. He tugged on her hair again, the sharp sting shooting right to her pussy. Don't forget me, Rafe said, his voice husky. Ian pulled his lips from her and tugged on her hair again, this time forcing her gaze to Rafe. The act of Ian controlling her kiss with Rafe made her want to come right there. She loved it when they went all badass with her, and with each other. Rafe cupped her face, then gently lowered his. His kiss was soft, tempting, where Ian's had been fire and heat. So different from the personas both men showed the world. She closed her eyes, tasting his dark sweetness as she rocked into him and Ian at the same time, their bodies so close to her and each other, making it easy. Ian pulled her away and brought his lips to hers again. She licked his lips and nibbled, loving the way both men's tastes mixed on her tongue. The heady combination reminding her that she'd missed this, that she'd craved this. Both men took turns kissing her, their hands roaming her back, cupping her ass. She got lost in the moment, not knowing how much time had passed, before they both pulled away and turned to each other. No matter how hot it was to have them kiss her, it made her hotter to watch these two men go at each other. Their moans echoed in the kitchen as their kiss deepened. As rough as they were with her sometimes, they were so much more demanding with each other. Hot as hell. She licked her lips again, watching and feeling part of their heat, even if no one was touching her. Well, if they weren't going to touch her. Her fingers brushed her nipples, and she gasped, the sensation of that gentle brush rocking her. Damn, she was turned on, and knew they had a hell of a lot more to do before she'd be sated. She cupped her breasts, palming the large mounds while pinching her nipples. Her body swayed as she rubbed her legs together, kneading the friction so she could come. If she could have just a little orgasm, she'd be able to go slow with her men. As if they'd heard her thoughts, Rafe and Ian pulled away from each other and faced her. "Trying to make yourself come without us?" Ian asked, his voice deep with need, his lips wet and swollen from their kisses. "We should be taking better care of you, Karina," Rafe rumbled, his honey eyes dark with intent and promise. Ian tilted his head. "Since she's been playing with herself, maybe we should let her continue. She doesn't need us, does she?" She narrowed her eyes. "Hey, stop it with the 'I'm a bastard' motif, sugar. You know I can make myself come, but right now, I want both of you to do it for me. It's only right." Ian grinned, but she wasn't sure she was about to get what she wanted. He always made her wait until it was the best possible. So while she hated him while she was squirming, she loved him when he filled her. Tricky bastard. "What do you want, Sassy?" Ian asked. She licked her lips and glanced down at his erection tenting his pants, then saw the matching one in Rafe's. As much as she wanted to come right there, what she really wanted was to taste her men. "You," she whispered. Ian grinned, and Rafe chuckled. "On your knees, baby." He held out his hand, and she placed her own in it as she knelt down in front of him. Her breath quickened as she undid Ian's belt and undid his pants. While some women might hate it, she loved sucking cock. She loved having the power, even though Ian and Rafe usually set the pace for her. She was the one giving them pleasure, and just the thought of that made her wet as hell. Because when she was done with them, they'd reciprocate in the best way imaginable. As quickly as possible, she pulled down his boxer briefs enough so she could grip his cock. He filled her hand, hot, hard, and ready for her mouth. Not wanting to leave Rafe out, she pressed a kiss to Ian's cock, then undid Rafe's pants. Ian pulled at her hair, fisting it as he had before while Rafe held her shoulder. She pulled Rafe out of his pants and licked the crown while she wrapped her hand around the base of Ian's shaft. She hadn't had a threesome since she'd been with Ian and Rafe, but the dexterity it took to pleasure them both at the same time apparently had never gone away. With one last wink at her men, she got down to business, licking up Rafe's length before doing the same to Ian's. Both men moaned, and she smiled before sucking on the head of Ian's cock, letting her tongue brush the seam. He bucked into her mouth, and she put her hand on his hip to keep him steady. She pulled away slightly to look up at him. "Let me taste you both first, before you fuck my mouth." "I love that dirty mouth of yours," Rafe said, and she rolled her eyes. She went back to what she was doing and licked the drop of pre-cum on the tip of Ian's dick before doing the same to Rafe's. She held both of their cocks in her hands, and she gripped them hard, rolling her wrists slightly as she pulled upward so she could glide along their lengths. Ian's dick was slightly longer with a curve to the left that hit a spot right inside her that used to make her eyes cross when he fucked her hard. Rafe's was thicker and stretched her in a sexy as fuck way whenever he pushed that meaty cock inside of her. Damn, she'd miss these two. Rafe cupped her cheek and grinned. Let me watch you take Ian, Sass. Then you can have me. I love it when you suck on his balls when you go down on him. She held back the moan in her throat, then nodded before turning to Ian, because she knew Rafe and Ian loved it. She pushed his cock up to his belly and sucked on his balls. She rolled one on her tongue, moved to the other, and did the same. She could feel Ian's dick throb as she sucked, so she repeated the process. When she couldn't take it anymore, and had a feeling Ian was feeling the same, she moved to suck Ian down in one movement. His gasp of need and surprise was music to her ears. She pulled back, eager to continue once she found her breath. Let me help you, Rafe said, and she looked up to see him standing behind Ian. He gripped the base of Ian's shaft and held it up to her lips. She grinned, then sucked Ian down again. Ian's hand tightened in her hair, and she froze, letting her jaw widen. With Rafe's help directing, Ian fucked her mouth. When he pulled out, she rolled her tongue, then swallowed on the tip as he sank to the back of her throat. Jesus, Ian grunted, but didn't stop moving his hips. She hollowed her cheeks and hummed, looking up to see Ian's hand resting on Rafe's shoulder. Whenever her mouth would leave his dick, Rafe's hands would squeeze and run along his length. Finally, Ian pulled away, his dick still hard since he hadn't come, and moved out of the way. Rafe stood there, his cock jutting out. She licked down his length as Ian came around behind her. She looked over and grinned as she shucked his clothes. What are you doing back there? She purred. Ian chuckled, then gripped her shoulders. Suck him off, then I'm going to eat that pretty pussy of yours, darling. Well, that sounded like a plan. She swallowed Rafe whole, bobbing her head up and down as she set the pace this time. Ian's hands came from around her waist as he knelt behind her. He cupped her breast through her bra and pinched her nipples. Hard. She gasped around Rafe's cock as Ian pinched even harder and twisted slightly. The pain made her pussy ache, ready for either of their cocks, but she knew she would have to wait. She increased the pace, wanting to make Rafe lose control. Ian's hands left her breasts, only to go to Rafe's thighs. The sight of his strong hands on Rafe's even stronger legs almost made her come, but she held back. Ian rolled Rafe's balls in his hand as she hollowed her cheeks to suck him harder. Rafe pulled back, and she blinked up at him while resting on Ian's shoulder. I'm with Ian here, Karina. As much as I want to come down that pretty throat of yours, I'd rather make you come around my cock first. She licked her lips, the salty taste of both men lingering. Whatever you say. Ian chuckled against her as he kissed her neck. I like the sound of that. Before she could blink, she found herself standing, both men pulling off her clothes. And then she was on her back on the kitchen island, with Ian's head between her legs. Ian! She gasped at the first swipe of his tongue. He licked and nibbled along her slit, before honing in on her clit. She rocked her body against his face, wanting more. Let Ian taste you, Sassy, Rafe whispered as he pushed down her hips, giving Ian more control. She tried to keep her eyes from rolling to the back of her head, but it was damn hard with Ian licking her up like a cat with cream. It was even harder when Rafe sucked on one nipple, pinching the other with his nimble fingers. He bit down on the bud while he rolled the other, and she came against Ian's face and around the 2 fingers he'd pumped into her. Their names left her lips on a scream as they kept up their attack, not relenting until she found herself cresting another wave. She'd only ever had so many orgasms at once with these 2, and she thanked God some things never changed. Her body went limp even though she still wanted to feel them both inside her. She felt Ian lift her up into his arms and carry her to the L-shaped couch with the deep cushions that were perfect for 2 people to cuddle on comfortably. All 3 of them were soon naked, and Ian was between her legs as she lay on her back, so she was splayed out for them both. Ian stood over her, bending so he could reach her legs, while Rafe stood behind him. Rafe reached around Ian's body and rolled a condom over his cock, and Sassy about swallowed her tongue. No matter how hot she thought she was with either of them, she loved watching them together, because it made their heat rise even more. It might make her a dirty, dirty Sassy, but she didn't care. She fucking loved it. Ian turned to the side, and she caught something that hadn't been there the last time they'd made love. "Is that ink on your back?" she asked. Rafe's eyes widened, and he went behind Ian. "Holy shit, it's the Irish Trinity, dude. That's fucking gorgeous." Sassy gave a watery smile. "You have a Trinity on your back? Let me see." Ian gripped his dick, but turned for her. God, it was beautiful. Heavy and dark, the 3 parts of the Trinity were interwoven and carved in Gaelic. It was amazing. The fact that he'd done it after they were broken up was telling, but she couldn't talk about that now. Not when she wanted him inside her. Now. "Ready?" Ian asked, his voice strained. "Always," she whispered, then moaned as Ian sank into her inch by agonizing inch. He filled her up, their hips aligning, brushing against each other, while she stretched to accommodate his length. Just how she knew she'd have to stretch again to accommodate Rafe's girth. "Jesus, you feel so fucking good." Ian gritted out, then pulled out slightly. Sassy moaned as her inner walls clenched, not wanting to let him go. "Look over here, Sass," Rafe whispered, "and get up on your elbows." When she was focused on Ian, Rafe had moved so he was standing on the couch beside her, his cock right at her lips. She opened for him and let go. Both men fucked her hard, Ian in her pussy, Rafe in her mouth. Rafe's hands tangled in her hair, while Ian's gripped her hips. Ian pumped his cock in and out of her at a steady, unending yet exquisite pace, until he slammed into her hard once more and shouted her name. Sassy let go of Rafe's cock and kissed Ian as he filled the condom. Ian pumped again, this time his thumb thrumming her clit, and she came, her moan covered up by Ian's mouth. He pulled out, even as her body still shook, and Rafe slid inside her. She let her head fall back to rest on the couch as Ian went to dispose of the condom. Rafe must have covered himself with another one when she'd been coming, because she could see it wrapped around him as he pulled out of her. His fingers dug into her waist as he pistoned into her, their gazes locked. Ian came back into the room and sat beside her, his hands roaming her body. He cupped her breasts, suckled on her nipples, and then moved his hands down to play with her clit as Rafe made love to her. "Shit, Every time you suck on her nipples, I can feel her clench around me, Rafe grunted. Ian let go of her nipple with a pop. Now you know how I feel, love, he said to Rafe, then went back to work on her breasts. Needing to be connected even more than she was, she wrapped her hand around one of Rafe's wrists and tangled her free hand into Ian's hair. She closed her eyes, lost in the movements and sensations, until she found the wave again and came crashing down once more, this time with Rafe as he jetted into the condom. Rafe pulled out, jogging away to take care of the condom, while Ian and Sassy laid down on the couch. I've missed that. Missed you, Ian mumbled. She smiled and sank into him. Rafe came back and pulled a blanket off the back of the couch. Ian pulled her on top of his body as Rafe laid next to them. She rolled on her stomach so she could cuddle with both her guys, her limbs limp, her body sated. God, we have to do that again, she whispered. Rafe patted her butt and chuckled. Let me rest for a bit before round 2. I'm not as young as I used to be. She smiled and waited for Ian's response, only to find him passed out next to Rafe. I guess we tired him out. She looked at Rafe and laughed at both her sleeping men. With a happy sigh, she lay down on top of both of them and wiggled. Yep, still got it. Chapter 6.
Are you sure I look okay? Should I cover up my ink?
Rafe closed his eyes and held back the retort that came to his lips. While he loved the woman in front of him, the fact she was even asking that question made him want to bang his head against the wall. She shouldn't have been as nervous as she was, and yet there was no stopping it apparently. She'd put on nice slacks and a cute lacy top thing that made her breasts look fucking lickable as hell. But it wasn't the Sassy he knew and loved. She'd even put her hair up into this bun thing that only elongated her neck. He walked slowly toward her and cupped her face. The worry in those sexy brown eyes of her made him want to hold her and never let go. Not that she'd let him. No, she'd push away and take care of herself because that's who she was. Or at least, who she usually was. This Sassy in front of him wasn't that woman. He needed to fix that and alleviate her fears. Sass, stop it and breathe, Karina. He brushed his lips against hers, and she relaxed. We're just going to my parents' home for dinner. You've had countless dinners with them before. The only difference is that now we're a bit older. She grimaced, and he kissed her again.
It's not like it was before, Rafe. I used to be their ward or live-in or whatever. They knew I was dating you, but I don't know if they knew we were with Ian at the time.
Rafe let out a breath. I don't know either, baby. We kept it to ourselves because we were afraid of what everyone would think. But we aren't those people anymore. You know Ian would be here with us if he hadn't had to work. They couldn't ignore the possibility of misconceptions like they had when they were younger. Their relationship wouldn't survive if they did. He could sense her tension and see the uncertainty in her eyes. They were doing this to her, turning the vibrant and sexy woman into a pile of nerves. Damn it. He ran his hand down her back and cupped her ass. The resulting flare of heat in her eyes made him smile. There she is. Sassy pulled back somewhat and looked down at her body before shaking her head.
What the hell am I wearing?
Rafe held back, knowing if he smiled, she would hit him. Hard. I didn't realize you owned that sexy secretary get-up. She narrowed her eyes at him.
I believe they are called administrative assistants now.
He held up his hands in mock surrender. My apologies.
And if I were dressed as a sexy secretary, I'd be wearing a skirt so you could fuck me on top of the desk. Come on now, you know that's how all the good porn does it.
Rafe threw his head back and laughed, even as his cock hardened at the thought of Sassy in heels and a little skirt as he fucked her on top of his desk. Or maybe Ian's desk. Yeah, that would be better since Ian had a bigger office, and the whole suit and tie thing totally fit those fantasies. Maybe he and Sassy could fuck Ian over that desk too.
Oh my God, stop thinking about sex right now, Rafe Chavez.
Sassy slapped his shoulder, and Rafe snorted. You started it, babe. Well, maybe. This whole conversation was a blur of angst and sexy as hell heels.
We are on our way to go see your mother. She'll know what we've been thinking.
She always knows. Rafe grinned. He sure as hell hoped his mom didn't know everything that went on in his head. He wasn't even sure that she knew about him and Ian. He'd always been bisexual, but had never been out of the closet to his parents. They didn't know what they'd have thought about it, what they would think now. He'd been such a little shit as a teenager that when he'd finally found his way and learned to act like a man, he'd been afraid to break any trust he'd formed again. He'd hidden his feelings for Ian as anything more than his best friend from the family, and Rafe knew it played a role in Ian's departure. Ian and Sassy weren't the only two who held blame for the demise of their relationship. Rafe had his own failures, and he knew he needed to redeem those. Today was the first step in the right direction by bringing Sassy home. He'd hoped to bring Ian as well, but it might have been just as well he wasn't with them. Taking baby steps sounded like a good way to approach this. Jesus, this was fucking complicated. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. If he went into the day thinking the worst, he'd just stress himself out, just as he was sure Sassy had been doing from the way she was dressed. Rafe looked down at his own dark jeans and button-down shirt, then at Sassy. Karina, put on jeans and keep that sexy as hell top. It shows off the ink on your arms, and when you bend over, I'll be able to see the ink on your back. Her eyes widened. I'm not bending over in your parents' house for you. She gave a saucy grin. And no promises, but I might tease you if you annoy me enough. He kissed her hand, sliding his tongue against hers. Damn it, you get me worked up, Sass. But really, you're welcome to wear jeans and anything you want. He reached around and unclipped her hair. The long tresses fell over her shoulders in waves, and he sighed at the sight. Damn, his woman was fucking sexy as hell. He'd have to keep her hair up so he could pull it down again, but next time, she'd be naked. Fuck, yeah. You're thinking about sex again. He licked his lips. Hell yeah, but don't worry. I can control myself. Maybe. Show your ink. Let your hair down. Wear what you want to in order to feel comfortable and be yourself. There's no reason to hide. Her eyes filled with tears, and she blinked them away, but not before one fell down her cheek. His heart ached as he brushed away the moisture with his thumb. Sassy, baby, what's wrong? He'd do whatever he could to make sure she knew she was special and his. God give him strength. Other than you're acting all rough and perfect at the same time? She shook her head, then rolled her shoulders back. I left them too, Rafe. What if they hate me for it? I didn't stay in contact because I was scared. I might have only lived 20 minutes away, but there could have been an ocean between us considering how it felt. He closed his eyes and cursed himself. Of course that's what she'd be freaking out about. She'd lived with his family for a long time and walked out on them just the same. She'd done it to protect herself, and in doing so, she'd hurt his family. But not to the extent she must be thinking. His family was very forgiving when it came to people they loved. He should know. Karina, stop worrying. They missed you, and yes, they were worried, but they knew you'd left for a reason. Let's go see them and get the hard part over with. They invited you over, Sass. They want you there. We'll talk, laugh, eat good food, and then, when we get home, we'll make love, and hopefully, this time actually make it to the bed on the first try. She laughed softly, exactly as he'd intended. We always say we're going to make it to the bed, and only end up sleeping there since we've tired ourselves out everywhere else. He cupped her ass, bringing her flush against his body, his rock-hard cock pressed against her belly, and she raised a brow. You did this, he groaned. Her hand went between them and ran along his length. No, honey, you did this, but I'll take care of it later. She winked. We're going to be late if I don't change now and head out. 2 minutes. She sashayed to the bedroom, his gaze following that generous ass of hers. He just shook his head. Yep, that's the Sassy he loved. It only took her getting him turned on and turned inside out for her to come back. By the time she changed into ass-hugging jeans that he'd enjoy peeling her out of later and made their way to his parents' house, they were only 5 minutes late. Not bad considering Rafe had taken the time to make sure Sassy's jeans fit just right using the palm of his hands. From the way Sassy glowed, he had a feeling his mom would know exactly why they were late. But he didn't care. He finally had the woman of his dreams next to him, and the man of his dreams in his heart, and he hoped, waiting for them when they got home. He didn't need much else. Before they could even make it up to the porch steps, his mother opened the front door and approached them with her arms wide open. Sassy! His mother pulled Sassy up the steps and enveloped her in those same strong arms that had held him countless times. Though his mother was at least a foot shorter and could practically fit in his pocket, she was stronger than anyone he'd known. Mrs. Chavez? Sassy's reply was a little stilted, but there was warmth there that went straight to Rafe's heart. This was her family too. He just had to make sure she understood that and didn't pull away. Again. His mom pulled back and frowned. Mrs. Chavez? Do you think I'm my husband Carlos's mother and not Rafe's? No, honey, you call me Juanita, or Mom. I'll take nothing else. Sassy grinned, and Rafe pulled his mother away a bit so he could kiss her cheek. Thank you, Mom, he whispered, and she patted his cheek. You're a good boy, Rafe. Thank you for bringing Sassy home to us. There was a twinkle in her eyes he couldn't interpret. And next time, I expect you to bring Ian too. It's about time the three of you were together again. Rafe stopped breathing, his feet frozen to the spot. What? His mom shook her head, then wrapped her arm around Sassy's waist. I knew then that the three of you were together. You can't fool me, young man. You were all so in love you couldn't hide it even if you tried. I know Ian thought he'd pulled off the cool and remote rich kid. He didn't, honey. He was in so deep with you, just as you and Sassy were with him. It was obvious. Sassy reached and gripped his hand, but he still couldn't process what his mom was saying. She'd known? This whole time she'd known. He thought he'd hidden it so well. Apparently he shouldn't have even tried. I don't know what you're thinking, Rafe, but know this. I've loved you since I first found out I was pregnant with you, and I will always love you. Your family feels the same. You have 3 sisters, 2 brothers, a father, and countless other members of the family in there waiting to see you and Sass. They love you, and they won't turn their backs on you for loving who you love. And when you bring Ian by, we'll be the same. Rafe lowered his head, but pulled his mom close, bringing Sassy with her. He wrapped his arms around his girls, the weight of what he'd been holding close sliding off his shoulders. "I can't believe you knew this the whole time," he rasped, his body shaking. From relief or the overwhelming urge to run to Ian and bring him there too, he didn't know. "Honey, you can't slide things by me." His mom squeezed him one more time, then pulled away. "Now, let's get you two inside and fed. They're probably already pressed up against the window trying to see what the holdup is." "I'm surprised they haven't come out yet," Sassy said as she tangled her fingers with his. He gripped her hand, thankful for the anchor. She'd always been his anchor, even when she'd been the one on the run. Without her, well, he hadn't been whole. They walked inside and were greeted by his family, smiles and hugs bringing Sassy and Rafe into the fold. As much as Sassy had left them, he never forgot he'd done the same. Oh, he'd come back for holidays and births, but he'd made a home somewhere else. Now he was back, and he had to learn to blend with his family like he had before. "Rafe." His father's deep voice pulled him out of his thoughts. The man had his arm around Sassy's shoulder and a grin on his face. "Good to see you could make it, Niño." "Dad," he said, and hugged the man hard, bringing Sassy into it like he had with his mom. His dad grinned, but there was tension in his eyes like there had been at work, something Rafe hoped would fade with time. "When you get time, we need to talk about the shop. There are things... Niño, you know that I trust you with everything, but some things do not need to change." When his father said everything, it didn't mean what it should, but this was neither the time nor place. His family might agree with his lifestyle, which was a surprise in itself, but having a father and son run a business together didn't always go smoothly. "We can talk about it later," Rafe said with a smile, not wanting to cause an issue when today needed to be about Sassy, and later, Ian. "For now, let's eat good food and show my girl off." He kissed Sassy's brow, and she laughed. "I can usually show myself off, sugar, but if you want to do the honors, I'm all yours." He smiled and nodded at his father, who got the message, then walked to the backyard where his family was partying. It was odd how much he wanted Ian to be there with them, celebrating their time together as a triad. He knew Ian had planned on going public with the three of them, and the fact that Rafe's family accepted him, this just might work. He looked down at the woman in his arms and sighed. It better work, because he'd do anything for her, anything for Ian. He just needed to make sure that it wouldn't be for nothing, because if they ran away from him again, well, he didn't know what he'd do then. He'd been broken once before, and if it happened again, he wasn't sure he'd be able to put himself to rights. Sassy and Ian had quickly become his whole world, and that scared him. Rafe would just have to prove to them that they could make it work. With the scent of his mother's cooking, the sounds of laughter and happiness, and the feel of acceptance surrounding them, it just might be possible. Once dinner was over, they made their way to her place in record time. He barely had the engine off before Sassy was out the car with him following. He chased her up the stairs, a grin on his face. When she opened the door, he pushed her through it, held onto her wrist, and slammed her against it as it shut. Her eyes widened, and she grinned. "Eager, are we?" He cupped her face. "Did I hurt you?" He hadn't meant to slam her into the door that hard, but damn, after hours of being with others and unable to be near enough to her, he couldn't hold back. She squeezed his ass and rocked against him, the hard ridge of his cock digging into her belly. "I liked it. You held my wrist and used the other hand to hold the door so I wouldn't hit too hard."
The door just made a loud sound. That's why it made it look like you were rough.
She grinned.
Well, you were rough, but in the sexy alpha way. Now, go on and finish your plan. I hope you're going to fuck me against it.
He shook his head. This woman understood him so fucking well it scared him. I'm going to eat you out against the door, and then I'll make love to you in your bed because I promised. Her eyes darkened, and she gave him that little smile that always went straight to his cock. He tugged off his shirt and watched the way her gaze followed the lines of his abs and chest. He'd work out even more if he could keep getting her to look at him like that. He wrapped his hand around the back of her neck and brought her in for a kiss. He loved the way she tasted, all sweet and spicy at the same time. He pulled back and tugged up her shirt. She lifted her arms, and he took it off her, then gazed down at her in her bra and sexy jeans. He told her that he'd loved the way they molded to her thighs and ass, and he'd meant it. God, he fucking loved her curves. He undid the front clasp of her bra, so her breasts were bare. Her rose-colored nipples were hard and begged for his mouth. He lowered his head and sucked one into his mouth, using his hand to plump her breast as he nibbled and licked. He moved to her other breast and knelt down. She was just short enough that he could suck on her nipples and get a face full of breasts. Seriously, he loved this part. He moved down her body, leaving kisses and bites down her stomach, until he came to the top of her jeans. He undid the button and zipper and pulled her pants down over her ass, bringing her panties with them.
Rafe.
She moaned as she wiggled out of her jeans, and he threw them to the side. God, I love your taste, he said, before he pulled one leg over his shoulder and licked her slit. She put one hand on his shoulders to steady herself, and he lapped her up. He spread her and fucked her with his tongue and then 2 fingers. Each moan she made coincided with the sexy flutter of her pussy, and he knew she was close. He reached around with his free hand and probed her hole, knowing that they hadn't done anal play yet, but it would be coming soon.
Yes, Rafe, just like that. My vibrator with the attachment doesn't do it like your fingers do.
He about came in his pants at her admission, but kept his mouth on her clit, wanting her to come. His Sassy like to play with herself all kinky-like? He was one lucky man. He hummed against her clit as his fingers passed the tight ring of muscles. He only had her own juices as lube, so he only put the tip in, not wanting to hurt her.
Rafe.
She came on his tongue, and he kept the pressure on her clit, knowing she liked it best that way. With her eyes still closed, he stood up, keeping his hand on her hip so she wouldn't fall, then picked her up. He carried her to the bedroom like he'd promised before, her head on his shoulder, her body still shaking. How do you want it, Sass?
Fuck me on all fours. I love it when you go deep like that.
He grinned. You're a dirty girl. She rolled her eyes, and he put her on her feet.
You're such a dude for saying that.
He slapped her ass as she turned and moaned even as she looked over her shoulder to raise a brow at him. Get on all fours in the middle of the bed, Karina. That way when you get weak-kneed, you won't fall on your face. She laughed, exactly as he wanted her to, and he pulled off his pants after he took the condom from his wallet. He rolled it on his length, his cock beyond ready to sink into that pretty pink pussy. He slid into her in one thrust, and they both sighed at the same time. He pumped into her, his fingers digging into her hips as he fucked her. He leaned over her so his front was to her back, even as her hips lifted to meet his thrusts. "Kiss me, my Sassy," he whispered.
"Mine,"
she said as she turned her head. "Yours." He took her lips and came hard within her. He swiveled his hips so his groin slid along her clit, and she shuddered. Her inner walls clenched around him as she came with him. "Mine," he said back.
"Yours,"
she whispered, her voice heavy. They both sank down to the bed, his cock still inside her, yet he wasn't ready to move. He cupped her cheek, and she looked over her shoulder at him once more so he could take her lips. Their sweat-slicked bodies lay in a pile as their breathing finally evened and he swallowed hard, too overcome with the past and their future to speak. This was what he wanted all those years, and yet hadn't known he craved it. Sassy was his and Ian's. He just prayed to God they didn't leave him again. Chapter 7. Ian ran his hands down his chest, smoothing out his tie. He had no idea why he felt so stiff and uncomfortable right then, but it bothered him. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. If he didn't get his act together, he'd scare the other patrons of the restaurant. With his dark looks and even darker scowl, most people knew to comply to his demands. That's how he'd made his way up the ladder of high-end real estate. That and the steel name. Tonight, he would use that name to get the table he desired, but would do his best to lose the scowl. After all, he didn't want to scare away Sassy on their date.
"Ian, are you coming?"
He blinked away the doubts that seemed to creep in when he least wanted them, and turned to his date, his Sassy. It didn't matter to him if she wore cut-off jeans, a flowy hippie dress, or nothing at all. He loved the way his woman looked. Right then, though, her beauty made him so lightheaded he thought he'd pass out. They were dining out at one of the nicer restaurants in New Orleans that night, and she'd apparently decided to go formal. Her long black dress hugged her curves in all the right places. The heart neckline accentuated her breasts, but didn't make her look cheap. No, there was nothing cheap about Sassy, and he loved that about her. She'd left her hair down. Rafe told him she'd tried to put her hair up when they visited his parents, and he'd taken it down. Ian sensed she left it down this time for him, something that not only surprised him, but made him fall for her all over again. Her wild hair had one simple streak of black in it to match her dress, understated for what she normally did with it, but he still liked it. Rafe had mentioned how sexy she looked when he'd taken down her hair, though, and Ian knew that they'd have to play with that sometime. Right now, however, it was all about Ian and Sassy. They might have been a triad, but they were also comprised of 3 coupled relationships. That made it imperative that they not only spend time as the 3 of them, but on their own as well. It wasn't that he liked one more than the other. He just knew that he needed both. He needed time alone with Sassy as much as he needed time alone with Rafe. When the 3 of them were together, it was like they'd put all those pieces together, forming a finished puzzle only they understood. Complicated didn't even begin to cover it, but he didn't care. He loved the 2 of them, and he'd be damned if he'd walk away again and lose it all.
"Ian, what is wrong with you tonight?"
He shook his head, then tucked her hand in his, bringing it to his lips. He brushed a soft kiss against her fingers and smiled. "I'm sorry, love. I can't seem to get out of my own head tonight." They were standing in front of his car as the valet stood by them, his hand outstretched. Ian gave a cool smile and a nod to the younger man, as well as his keys, before taking Sassy's arm in his. "Now let me get you inside before I stand here all night wool gathering." She frowned at him, but followed, her arm tucked beneath his. "You can wool gather all you want, Ian, but if you'd rather stay at home tonight, we can leave." There was something in her tone that sparked a memory, and he cursed himself. Before, when he pulled away emotionally, he'd acted aloof, locked inside his own head. If he wasn't careful, Sassy and Rafe would think he was doing the same now. It wasn't even close to being the same mindset for him, but he understood their fears. It might have grated that they didn't trust him not to walk away, but he couldn't blame them. The hostess sat them at a table in one of the secluded corners as requested. With a nod to the woman, he pulled Sassy's chair back and helped her sit. "You know, I could have done that on my own, but I kinda like it when you act all old-world manners on me." Ian grinned, enjoying the fact that no matter what she wore, she was still sassy. "You might like it a little when I act old-fashioned, but if I were to do anything more than what I just did, you'd have my balls in a vice in no time." She winked, her eyes full of laughter. "Damn straight." Their waiter brought the wine list and told them about the specials. Ian didn't care what he ate that night, since he knew everything tasted great, and as long as Sassy was his dinner companion, he'd have the night he wanted. He raised a brow in Sassy's direction. "Would you like to get one of each of the specials and call it a day?" Sassy's eyes widened a bit before she smiled. "Sure, that makes things easy." The waiter nodded and left while Ian took a sip of his water. "Why did it look like I surprised you with our order?" Her brows furrowed as she thought about her words, then licked her lips. "I don't want you to get the wrong impression of what I'm going to say." He frowned. "You never have to hold anything back from me." "I know that. Or at least, I think I do now. Back when we were first dating, you used to take a while to pick your food. Like you needed it to be just right or something. And when we walked in here, I saw a few suits look in your direction for some kind of acknowledgement of their presence. But you didn't respond. You just looked at me the whole time. Don't get me wrong, I freaking love that you don't seem to care about what others think. But it's different than how you used to be." Ian frowned, knowing she was right, but not liking who he'd used to be if that's what she thought. "Have I been that way in the past weeks?" He hadn't thought he'd changed that dramatically since he'd seen her again. Yes, he had grown up in the past 10 years, but this wasn't the first time they'd been out on a date alone together. Sassy shook her head, then reached out for his hand. "No, you've been great, Ian. I promise. I only mention it now because I noticed how different you are. Not bad different, just, I don't know." She sighed. "I like you, Ian. I like the old you, but I really like this new you." He tangled his fingers with hers over the table and smiled. "I like you too, Sassy. Both the old you and the new one. That's what happens when we grow up, I guess. We figure out if the new people can fit together as they used to." Images of how sexy she looked when they fit together in a certain way filled his mind, and he held back a groan. "I know what you're thinking, and, yeah, we fit together that way too." She winked, and he threw his head back and laughed. He could feel the stares from the people around them, but he didn't care. This woman made him feel like he was something special for who he was, not for what he could do for her. He'd loved her all those years ago, in a way he hadn't thought possible, but now it was even deeper. He was one lucky bastard. "Ian, I thought that was you." Ian turned to the deep voice who'd spoken and gave a small smile. Dean was one of his father's friends, and while the man had always been tolerable, he wasn't one of Ian's favorite people. "Dean," Ian said as he stood. He glanced at Sassy, who seemed as annoyed as he was that they were interrupted. The two of them had clearly been on a date and in the middle of a conversation, but people of his father's ilk, like Dean, didn't care about things like being considerate. "I heard you'd moved back to town." The man didn't even look in Sassy's direction, and Ian merely raised a brow. "Let me introduce you to my companion, Sassy." He held his hand out for Sassy, who stood on her own. She held her hand out for Dean, who blinked, then shook her hand awkwardly. "Nice to meet you, Dean," she said politely. "You as well, my dear," he said, clearly not quite sure what to make of her. After all, Sassy was unlike anyone Ian had dated in New York. While the ice queens Ian had tolerated in the city had been platinum blonde and almost frail, Sassy was lush and looked fucking delicious. There was only one Sassy. "Do you work with Ian or his father?" she asked, seemingly genuinely interested. "I work with Richard, yes, but I hope that now Ian is back in town, we can do some business together." Sassy smiled, her eyes warm. "You can't go wrong with Ian." Dean smiled back, enchanted. "That I know. I'm sorry for interrupting your dinner, and I hope you two enjoy your evening. Ian, when you're settled, give me a call. I'd love to talk in a more appropriate setting." They said their goodbyes and sat down again. "Sorry about that," he said as their server brought their meals. Sassy waved it off. "Don't worry about it. It wasn't like you could ignore him, and he didn't outright say I wasn't right for you, so we're fine." Ian raised a brow. "And if I'd said your last name, he'd put two and two together and figure out who you really are." She shrugged, but he could see the spark fading in her eyes. Damn it, he shouldn't have brought it up. "Whatever. I'm not that girl anymore, and we both damn well know it. But he did seem like he didn't think of me like something on the bottom of his shoe or a hooker by the time he left." Ian snorted. "Baby, you don't look like a hooker." "I'm not as polished as any of the women in here, but I don't really care." He held her hand and brought it up to his lips. "Do you think I care? I love you, Sassy. You know that. I love Rafe too." He'd whispered both, but if someone heard, it didn't matter to him. "Sassy, whatever happens from here on out, I'm not going anywhere. I made mistakes before. We both know this. I'm not going to make them again." "And if people like Dean freak out about the three of us?" "Then fuck them." "Ian," she whispered, then shook her head. "Really, fuck them. They will get used to us. As long as they don't hurt you or Rafe, I don't care what happens outside of the three of us." "You can't really mean that, can you?" He let out a breath. "I'm not going anywhere. You're not going to truly believe that until you see it. So why don't we finish eating our meal, then go back to my place for dessert?" Her gaze heated, and he had to adjust his pants. "Well, fuck, I'd actually meant caramel ice cream, but I like where your mind went just then." She bounced in her seat. "Caramel ice cream? Can we have both?" The image of licking the sweet mixture from her nipples filled his mind, and he coughed. "Should I just ask for the check now?" "Now, sugar, or I'm gonna run out of here on my own and have you follow." The waiter quickly came when he was called, and Ian left enough cash to cover the bill and then some. They made their way to his car and piled in before he drove like a bat out of hell to his place. He purposely kept his eyes and hands off Sassy the whole time, or they wouldn't have made it in one piece. By the time they made it upstairs and behind closed doors, they were both panting, and his cock was going to have a permanent zipper scar. "We're acting like teenagers," Sassy gasped as she tugged his shirt off. He pulled hers off too, and they both took off their own pants. Their hands were shaking, and Ian chuckled. Why do we want each other so much right now? It's like there was something in that wine, he mumbled, then crushed his mouth to hers, unable to wait any longer. She smacked his ass, and he pulled back.
Did you just say you needed drugs to get hard for me?
She had a grin on her face, but still, one didn't anger the Sassy. He gripped her ass in his palms and lifted her so she wrapped her legs around his waist. They both swallowed hard as his cock pressed against her pussy. I'm saying you're my drug, baby. Now, I'm going to put you down because holding you like this when I'm not wearing a condom was short-sighted of me. He lowered her, but she slid down his body, slowly, and he had to suck in a deep breath not to bend her over and fuck her there. Plus, I promised you ice cream. He smacked her ass like she had him and grinned. Now go lay down on the floor in the bedroom, and I'll be right there. She raised a brow.
You're going to take a chance and ruin your expensive carpets for ice cream?
How little she thought of him. No, how little she thought of how he used to be. It'll clean, Sass. If I play my cards right, I'll be able to lick every drop off your nipples, so it won't be a problem. Now go lie down and spread out. I'm ready for my dessert. Her eyes widened, and with a saucy grin, she sashayed naked as the day she was born into his bedroom. He took a deep breath, willing the control he'd honed, and went to the freezer for Sassy's favorite ice cream. She lay on the ground, her hair splayed out around her. She rolled her nipple with one hand, while she slid the other in and out of her lower lips, her hips rocking to the motion. He almost dropped the carton and spoons right there. There was nothing sexier than a woman who knew exactly what she wanted, and knew that she didn't need a hard cock to get it. Yet, when she saw his dick, she smiled and winked.
Took you long enough,
she purred. He fell to his knees, took the lid off the ice cream, and scooped out a small bite. Before she could tell him what she wanted, he dropped it on her belly button. Totally not sexy, but she egged him on after all. She rocked up and wiggled.
Holy fuck, that's cold.
Let me warm you. He licked the cream over her stomach, then swallowed so she wouldn't be too cold. She moaned as he pulled back and placed a smaller drop of the melting dessert over her breasts and gorged himself. The sweet taste of her skin mixed with the caramel made for a decadent combination that was heady as any drug. They played with the ice cream, taking turns licking and tasting until they were full. He found the small of her back the best place for a scoop, and would have to make sure he let Rafe know that for later.
I'm all sticky,
Sassy said as they both panted. Neither of them had come, and their ongoing foreplay made them both hot as hell. I'm going to grab a condom, and then we'll make sure you don't get too much stickier. He chuckled as he stood up. She wrinkled her nose and shook her head.
That was crude, but I liked it.
As he walked back to her, he slid the condom over his length, liking the way her gaze tracked the movement. In fact, she seemed to like watching him a lot. Get up, face the mirror on the dresser, and grip the edge, he ordered. She grinned and did as she was told. He came up from behind her and placed his hands near hers so he could get a good grip but not crush her. Ready, my darling? He whispered, then kissed the small spot behind her ear. She shivered in his hold, and he rocked against her so his dick slid between her cheeks. She bent for him slightly, and he sank into her heat. He moved his hand so he could grip her hips and then pulled back. Their gazes met in the reflection, and he grinned back at her.
Ready, Ian. I'm ready for anything.
God, he hoped so, but those doubts weren't meant for then. Their gazes in the mirror never wavered as he pumped into her. Their breathing synchronized, and he increased the pace. His balls tightened, and the base of his spine tingled, and he knew he was about to come. He reached up and cupped her breast. She licked her lips, and then they came together, their moans echoing in the room as he filled the condom. He couldn't wait to fill her up when he was bare, but that was for later. Right now, he had the woman he loved in his arms, his cock fully inside her, and her body pressed against his. He'd take that for now, and pray that one day it would be more, that she wouldn't leave him, that she would trust him to do the same. He shook off the melancholy thoughts and kissed her softly. "Mine," he whispered.
"Yours and mine too,"
she panted back. "Yours, Sassy. Always yours." Chapter 8.
"So Sassy's working tonight?"
Rafe asked, though he thought he already knew the answer considering she wasn't in the loft with him and Ian. Ian sat on the couch next to him, his tie undone, and looking mighty sexy and disheveled. He took a swig of his beer and leaned his head back. "She closes tonight with Shep, who is then taking her to his place so his girl Shay and Sassy can have a girls' night. His cousin Austin is in town again, and they're going out so the girls can have some time alone."
"That's right,"
Rafe said, then took a sip of his own beer. "He invited us along too, right?"
"Yeah, but I declined for us since I know we've both been working our asses off trying to acclimate to the move."
He closed his eyes, his head aching like a bitch after the day he'd had. His dad still ran the shop in New Orleans, even though Rafe bought him out years ago since Rafe owned the other two in the franchise he'd made. The blend of two dominant men in one workspace wasn't working out as well as he'd hoped. He'd run from Sassy and Ian, only to end up living near Ian for a decade anyway. He'd come back to New Orleans so he would quit running from his problems. When he'd been gone, he made sure he kept distant from his family because he'd shamed them, or at least he thought he had. Damn, his parents were way more tolerant and accepting than he'd given them credit for. That in itself would have shamed him more for his lack of faith. But Sassy hadn't let him pile it on. After all, they'd chosen to move on and find their own futures. However, working with his father was turning into a bitch all on its own. His old man didn't have the same visions as Rafe did. And while Rafe accepted his dad would never change, some things in life had to. He'd work it out or open up a new shop as part of the chain if he had to. No matter what, he wouldn't run away like he had before. He'd been young and stupid then. He was older now, and hoped to God not as stupid. There was one dominant man in his life at least, and things seemed to be running smoothly on that front, he hoped. He leaned over and rested his head on Ian's shoulder. Ian shifted so he could wrap his arm around Rafe comfortably. He took a deep breath and inhaled the sandalwood scent that was so Ian.
"What was your plan for the night then?"
Rafe asked, his voice a little drowsy. It was nice, sitting on the couch with the man he loved wrapped around him. They were just sitting there, staring at nothing, and he felt content. From the way Ian's body had relaxed around Rafe's, the other man was comfortable as well. Ian ran a finger down Rafe's shoulder, but didn't move otherwise. The tension in the room rose, but it was a heady one. "I hadn't thought of anything beyond just staying at home. I'm too damn tired to go out there and pretend to party with the 20-somethings.
Rafe grinned. Ian had always been something of a homebody, and older than his years when it came to being with people, but he wasn't going to bring that up. Not when they were getting along and just enjoying the evening. They sat there in silence for another 10 minutes or so, until Ian shifted and Rafe sat up straighter. Ian let out a breath and then put his forearms on his thighs, his head bowed. Rafe frowned and ran a hand up and down Ian's back. "What's wrong?"
"What are we doing?"
4 words. Just 4 words, and Rafe felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. He blinked, unsure of what to say. From the tone of Ian's voice, the set of his shoulders, Rafe knew they weren't talking about what they would do for dinner. No. This was the conversation Rafe had been afraid to have, even though he thought they'd had it already. Damn it, now he was mad. "What the hell do you mean, Ian?" Ian turned to him, his eyes wide.
"Why are you angry? I wanted to know the next step so I wouldn't be behind."
Ian stood, staggering back.
"Fuck, Rafe. You thought I was going to leave again? You really fucking thought that after all this, everything I've said and done, that I'd leave?"
Rafe stood so they were nose to nose. "You fucking left before." Pain arched through Ian's eyes before he shut it down.
"Fuck you, Rafe. I thought we were past that. Have I given you any cause to think I haven't been here?"
Rafe narrowed his eyes but didn't say anything. He couldn't come up with a damn thing, and that bothered him more than he wanted to say. His own insecurities were biting him in the ass.
"Ian," his lover held up his hand. "No, let me talk. I know I don't laugh and smile as much as you and Sassy do. I know I'm the one on the sidelines who just seems to be there. But I like it that way, Rafe. I like watching the two of you joke around and smile at the oddest things. I like knowing that I'm there, even if I don't have to be part of everything at all times."
Jesus, Rafe was an ass. "Ian, you're always part of it. I know you're here. God, I'm so fucking sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me." And now he was sounding like a teenage girl, or boy at this point for that matter. Ian lifted his lips in a small smile before shaking his head.
"I'm not going anywhere, Rafe. God, I made so many mistakes before, and we all know it. I was so afraid of what my parents would think about me not only loving a man, but loving that man and a woman at the same time. I was so fucking stupid for not doing what was inside my heart, rather than doing what everyone else expected of me."
Rafe didn't move, didn't speak, knowing this was important for Ian and them. Ian cupped Rafe's face, his strong hands an anchor when Rafe felt as if he were drifting, not knowing what was coming next.
"You and Sassy are my everything. You were before, and I didn't understand what that meant. I'm in this for the long haul, Rafe. But I need to know what the long haul is. We're fucking crazy just to show up at Midnight Inc. and want to start a whole life with Sassy without even talking about it with her first. But that's what we did. We made the big moment rather than waiting for something to happen."
Rafe turned his head to kiss Ian's palm. "I know. In retrospect, we could have gone about it a bit differently."
Ian grinned. "You don't say. It's been 2 months since we came back and tried to make this work, and I'm not going anywhere. You've got to believe that, or everything I'm doing isn't enough, Rafe."
"Jesus, I'm a fucking asshole."
Ian grinned. "Yeah, you are. But I love you."
"I love you too, Ian." Ian lowered his head and captured his lips in a fierce kiss. When he pulled away, he leaned his forehead against Rafe's.
"We're taking this slow, Rafe,"
he snorted.
"Well, As slow as we can since we're already sleeping together. Rafe grinned.
Well, we did have a past, so it's not that slow.
I'm putting everything out there, Rafe. I'm in. I know you are too, or you wouldn't be so scared of what could happen if I didn't.
I know that. I do. I just had a panic attack or some shit.
If you don't trust me, it's going to make it fucking hard to move on. I know I deserve it in some respects, but I'm here. And I hope to God Sassy is too.
Rafe closed his eyes. We have to give her the same benefit of the doubt we're giving each other.
I know. We are. But you'll notice that while the two of us have said we love each other, and Sassy as well, she hasn't said the words.
The pain in Ian's eyes was too hard to take, and Rafe kissed him softly. It crossed my mind.
Ian pulled back and shook his head. Look at us. It's been 2 fucking months of dating, the best sex of our lives, and connecting in a way that means something, and we're harping on the fact that she hasn't said she loves us.
The words matter with Sassy.
And that's what hurts so fucking much, because I don't know if she'll ever say them. It's so much easier to go back to what she was doing before we came back, rather than face the trials we're going to go through once the world finds out.
Ian wasn't being self-centered with that fear. He worked in a very public arena, and people had already been commenting that he was dating a secret woman named Sassy. It was only a matter of time before they found out about Rafe, and who Sassy was. They weren't hiding it, in fear that they'd hurt each other. In doing so, though, they'd allowed a new set of problems to creep up. They would deal with those problems, and Rafe knew it would be worth it. He just prayed Sassy would feel the same.
I'm not going to push her to say anything she doesn't mean, or if she does mean it, but isn't ready to admit it to us, or even herself,
Ian said. What do you want out of this? Rafe asked. He knew what he wanted. The whole damn thing. Vows, babies, and a way for the 3 of them to work and live together. The world could fuck itself for its views on what was right or wrong. They weren't hurting anyone with what they had, and everyone else could just get over it. Easier said than done. But if Rafe's family was fine with it, that was their greatest hurdle. Ian could give a flying fuck about his parents, Sassy the same. Her true family at Midnight Inc. was fine with menages, considering there was a triad at the shop already. Ian ran his thumb over Rafe's cheek.
I want everything, Rafe. I want it all. Just like you. It doesn't mean I deserve it, but I want it. I don't know how it will work beyond what we can do as the 3 of us work together, but we will find a way.
In terms of the 3 of us, it's just more communication if you think about it.
Ian rolled his eyes. Yeah, we're not the greatest at that.
Plus, more sex since there are 3 of us. Ian threw his head back and laughed. One of the sexiest things ever in Rafe's opinion.
There is that, and we're pretty fucking great at it.
Ian pulled him close, and Rafe rested his head on his shoulder. They stood there for a while in silence, their bodies swaying to a beat only they could hear.
We're going to be okay,
Ian whispered. Rafe closed his eyes and squeezed Ian's waist. Yeah, we will. The only thing they had no control over right then that mattered, and no desire to have control over, was Sassy. She was a force unto herself. As much as he and Ian loved each other, Rafe knew it wouldn't be the same without Sassy. She was the one who held them together and made their lives complete. She hadn't left, but was she fully committed? He didn't know. But he'd give her time. He and Ian both would.
She was their center. They had to make sure she knew it. Chapter 9.
So, is it different being with two guys rather than just one?
Shay's eyes widened, and she slapped her hand over her mouth, shaking her head.
I can't believe I just asked that,
she mumbled behind her hand. Sassy ran her hand through her hair, her bangles jiggling as she tried to hold back her laughter at the question.
Oh, honey, you're family. You can ask those questions,
Sassy teased. Shep, the love of Shay's life and one of Sassy's best friends, came up behind Shay and put his hands on her shoulders. Sassy, love, if she's family, maybe you shouldn't be talking about sex. And Shay, baby, I'm all the man you need.
Shay blushed hard and leaned into him. You're more than I can handle most days, Shep, but I like trying to handle you just fine.
Sassy grinned as Shep pulled Shay into a steamy kiss, then left her mussed, blushing, and looking sexy as hell. There was just something hot and sweet about looking at a couple, or triad, in love and knowing that there might be something for her as well. Oh, she wasn't ready to come out and say that she'd found her bliss, but she was definitely on the right track. She purposely kept her feelings from Ian and Rafe. After all, they'd only been reunited for a couple of months. They still had time to find their rhythm and figure out how each piece of their particular puzzle would fit together. However, that didn't mean she hadn't been thinking about it. God, some days it felt like it was the only thing she thought about. Things were going well, though. Great, even. She had moments with each of her men, and moments with both of them at the same time. It wasn't lost on her that she constantly thought of Ian and Rafe as her men. That's what they were. They were hers as much as she was theirs. Shep went back to his notepad, working on artwork for a design for Shay, leaving her and Sassy to talk about what they loved best, their men. Of course, Sassy had to answer the phones and do all of the other 30,000 things that went with being the Midnight Ink receptionist. But today was a rather slow day, thankfully. It was mostly just the artist working on upcoming projects, with only 2 clients and chairs getting inked. The buzz of the needle was a gentle hum, sliding up and down Sassy's spine. Oh yeah, it was totally time to get new ink. Maybe she'd get that ink Rafe and Ian had wanted when they'd first come into the shop a couple of months ago. It was hard to believe it had only been 2 months since they'd walked in and scared the shit out of her. God, she loved them, but she was waiting to tell them. Something was holding her back. She didn't know what, but she wasn't ready to let them know. What are you thinking about that's giving you that serious face? Shay asked, pulling Sassy out of her thoughts of love and her men. Sassy shook her head and smiled. There was no use talking about things she couldn't even fully form in her mind. She'd rather talk about the good things, like sex, and the fact that Shep and Shay would be getting married soon. Well, by soon she meant within the next year, but that was still pretty freaking cool. So, are you excited about your new ink? Sassy asked, changing the subject. Shay raised a brow but didn't point it out. I just finished my first piece with Shep, but he's planning number 2. I think it'll be a while before I get to it, though. I want to make sure I don't go crazy and get 12 tats in 12 months. Sassy tilted her head. You know, if they were small ones, that could be a good promotion. Shay rolled her eyes. Oh God, look what I started. Sassy grinned and turned to the front desk so she could write down that idea. Someone had left the morning paper on top of her legal pad, and as she moved it out of the way, something caught her eye. The Bordeaux whore is back in town. What does Daddy have to say about that? Sassy blinked as the buzzing in her ears grew louder and louder. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She put her finger on the column on the society pages and licked her lips. Sassy, what is it? Oh God, you're pale. Are you sick? Shep! She heard Shay calling out, but it was from somewhere far away, and moving even farther away. They'd found out. Someone had figured out who she was and how she was connected to Ian. She glanced at the words: whore, sodomist, and threesome, standing out and making her want to vomit. They'd found out about Rafe too. Strong hands pulled her around, and she looked into Shep's eyes, unseeing. Sassy, what's wrong, honey? Talk to me. Austin, get her some water. Sassy had forgotten Shep's cousin Austin was back in town. She'd have to make sure she teased him about his ink like she always did. That was, if she could ever think again, or face these people again. Oh God, what would they do when they found out she'd lied to them all this time?
Oh my God, Sassy.
Shay gasped beside her, and Sassy closed her eyes. Damn it, she'd seen the article.
Oh honey, that stupid bitch Vivian is such a fucking asshole when she writes in the gossip column. They put me and Shep in there when we first started dating because of my dad, but it blew over.
Sassy felt Shay's hand on her back, but she couldn't speak. She could only think of what she needed to do, and who she'd have to protect. That was her job. She was the Sassy. She'd have to give it all up to make sure Rafe's family, Ian's people, her crew, all of them would be okay. There was no other choice open to her. Because no matter how scandalous it was for Shay, the golden girl, to date an inked tattoo artist, it was nothing like being the lost Bordeaux princess, who found herself in a threesome with one of the most eligible men in the United States, and another man with no breeding, according to her parents' society circles. That's what they'd tear them down to. It didn't matter that she loved Ian and Rafe, or that they were both more than a label. Nothing mattered in the world where she'd grown up. That same world she still fought so hard to leave behind. The public face was the only thing that mattered in that world. Living the ultimate sin in their eyes would only harm Ian and Rafe. She couldn't do that. No matter what she thought of herself, she wouldn't hurt the men she loved. Damn it. Tears threatened, but she fought them back. She wouldn't break down in front of her friends, the family she'd made with ties she hoped to God were stronger than blood. Shit. Sassy, there's a crew out there with a camera saying they want to talk to you, Austin said from behind her, and Sassy held back a shudder. I locked the doors. This is private property, and they can go fuck themselves.
I need to get out of here,
she whispered, her voice broken, her everything broken. Shep ran a hand through her hair, but she barely felt it. Barely felt anything. Okay, honey, we'll get you out of here. She shook her head and pulled away. She could feel the stares of everyone in the room. People she loved walking toward her, trying to help, but she couldn't do it. Couldn't take it.
I need to be alone. I'm going to go out the back, but I don't have my car.
Austin threw his keys at her, and she caught them without thinking. It's my rental. Take it. I can hitch a ride with Shep easy.
Austin, I don't think she should be driving right now,
Shay admonished. I think she's stronger than any of us. If she needs to get the fuck away, we need to let her, Austin countered. God, even a man she'd only known for a couple of months thought she was stronger than she really was. She hoped she could live up to it, because she was about to do something that would take everything out of her. Sassy, Shep snapped, and she blinked out of whatever daze she was in. Get it together. I know you can do this. You need to leave? Okay, we can do that for you. But you don't get to drive out there and hurt yourself because you're locked in your head. Get me? She nodded, grateful for her family.
I'm going to be okay,
she lied. She'd never be okay with what she had to do, but she'd do it anyway. Strength didn't come from the easy choices, but from the very difficult ones that she was being forced to make now. We'll hold the fort, Shep said. Then you can tell us what happened. We're not going to pry.
She kissed him on the cheek, then ran out the back door. She couldn't see any reporters around, but she didn't trust them not to ambush her. She put her brain on autopilot as she drove to Rafe's garage. Ian would be there too. It was his day off, and he was helping out Rafe's family and forming those connections she craved. They were supposed to go out for lunch, the three of them, in another hour, and then Ian would spend the afternoon at midnight getting to know her family. At least, that had been the plan. Not anymore. A few spiteful words in a newspaper gossip column had ruined that. She pulled into the garage and shut off the engine. The tears still hadn't fallen. It was as if she were frozen in time, watching everyone around her moving around like nothing had happened. Like her world hadn't just shattered into a million tiny pieces and would never be whole again. "Sassy, are we late?" Rafe asked, a smile on his face. He had grease stains on his coveralls and looked strong enough that he could hold her with his will alone. It wasn't enough. "Baby?" Ian came out from the other room, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, making him look more casual than she'd ever seen him. He looked like he fit in the family, something she'd never be part of. "What's wrong?" Rafe asked as he came up to her. She took a step back when he tried to reach for her. The shock and pain on his face was like a blow to the chest, but this was how it needed to be. "Can we find a private place to talk?" She could see Rafe's father walking into the garage, and she couldn't face him, not when she was going to disappoint him and his family again. God, she'd done this before, but then it had been to protect her own heart. Now it was to protect them. There was a difference. There had to be. "Yeah, we can go to the back," Rafe said, the fear in his voice shooting straight through her. Funny, she'd thought she'd be numb by now. She followed them both and stood between them, knowing this would be the last time she'd do so. "Have you seen the papers?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. If she broke down then, she'd never stop and wouldn't be able to get it out. "Not yet," Ian said. "I read the front headlines, but I haven't looked at the rest. What is this, Sassy?" She shook her head. "Look at the gossip column when you get a chance. Or don't. They know." Rafe blinked. "Who knows?" "Everyone. They all know. They know the Bordeaux whore is in a threesome, and the lost princess is a shame to her family." Ian's face grew stormy. "What? What name did you just use?" She shook her head. "That's not important. You'll read all about it. What they wrote? It's not true. We know that. But it doesn't matter. What does matter is that we're hurting people being together. Ian, you'll lose so much by doing this. You too, Rafe. Your family might agree with what we're doing, but will they once they're hounded by my past and the future we thought to make?" "Fuck the world, Sass," Rafe barked. "We've been through this before. We're not losing you." She shook her head. "We've never done this before. I've spent my life trying to find out who I am, and if I stay and hurt the people I love because I wanted something I can't have, then I've lost myself as well." "Nothing we are is wrong," Ian whispered. She closed her eyes tight to keep the tears at bay. "I know that. I know. We've never been taboo in my head. I've never thought anything was wrong with loving two men. That isn't it. It's the fact that others would be hurt because of what I want. That's what kills me. That's the difference. If I could love both of you and never have it harm the people we love too, then I'd leap at the chance. But I can't be selfish." "Stopping this now isn't the answer," Rafe said, his voice hard. Stopping this now might make me a coward, but it saves the people around us. I was happy before you came back, and maybe, just maybe, I might find that again. If I don't, then I never deserved it in the first place."
The first tear fell, and she knew she was running out of time.
"I love both of you. Please know that. But I can't go on living something that will only hurt us all in the future."
Neither man spoke, their faces hard, and she nodded.
There. She'd done it. She'd broken it all. Again.
She turned on her heel, got in Austin's rental, and drove off. The tears fell in earnest now, but she drove on, not knowing where she was going. Home would be too much. Too much Rafe. Too much Ian. For as much as others had claimed she was strong, she knew it was a lie. No matter how strong she acted, no matter what she did to help the others in her life, she was weak. The Sassy wasn't destined for a happy ending. Chapter 10. "You're just going to let her leave?" Rafe's father barked, and Ian took a deep breath. He nodded at Rafe, then faced the man who would one day be his father-in-law if Ian had any say in it. "No, we're not. She might need time to breathe, but she doesn't get to leave us when she just told us she loved us." "Perfect fucking timing," Rafe bit out. "Language, niño." Rafe growled beside him, and Ian ground his teeth. "She left because of what she saw in the paper, so let's see what it is she saw, and then we fix it." Rafe stepped in front of him as he took a step toward the office. "Fix it? How are we going to do that? Fuck Ian, we just let her walk out of here." Ian cupped Rafe's cheek. "And if we'd forced her to stay, she'd resent the hell out of us. So we're going to look at the real issues here, the media, and who leaked this story, and fix it. Then we're going after her. We should have done that 10 years ago, and we're not going to make the same mistake again." He'd be damned if he'd act like he did before. He kept running Sassy's words over and over in his head, fixating on those that meant they had a chance at a future. She'd never told them she'd love them outright, not before, but the words were out there now, and she didn't get to take them back. She didn't get to run away for good. When he pulled up the gossip column on the damn society pages, he let out a roar. Rafe jumped and looked over his shoulder before letting go with a particularly vile curse that surprised Ian in its vehemence. "God, they were vicious to Sassy," Carlos whispered. "Who would do such a thing?" Ian ground his teeth. "They were petty and cruel to her, while saying that she's a disappointment to her family. Notice they didn't mention Rafe and me beyond who we were?" "The attacks were directed specifically at her," Rafe said. "And who would want to hurt her the most and have the ties to make it happen?" "Fuck. That fucking prick." "Her father?" Carlos asked, ignoring his son's language. "Mierda." Ian's brows rose in confirmation. He looked at Rafe and let out a breath. "Let's deal with him once and for all. He's always been in the background of our relationship with her. We've chosen to put it aside because acting on it could hurt her, but right now, we're going to fix it." "You really think she's going to like us going in and fixing the problem for her?" Ian shook his head. "No, she's going to hate it. She should face him, but not before she's ready. If we want to make our future work, we need to make sure that bastard isn't part of it. He needs to know he can't show up when he wants to hurt her. The only reason he even knows about us is because of who I am and the people who follow me. I'm going to use that to crush him." "And when she resents us because we took care of it for her?" Ian shook his head. "Then she can confront her father too. Right now, though, this is something we need to do. That fucker isn't the only thing that's bothering her, and once we assure her that we can make this work, then she's part of it as well. We're not doing it only for her. We're doing it for us." He wasn't just rationalizing. No matter how much Sassy might need to confront her father, it wasn't going to happen right then. The SOB didn't matter enough in the long run, and Ian would do what he could to make sure he no longer mattered at all. They hopped into Ian's car and drove to the Bordeaux estate on the other side of the city. He'd never been there, although because of his family connections, he'd been invited. The Steeles and Bordeaux would have made a perfect match in snob heaven. Too bad Ian and Sassy found each other the way they wanted to, not how their parents desired. He pulled up to the gate and lowered his window. "Can I help you?" the guard asked. "Tell Donald Bordeaux that Ian Steele is here, and he'd better let us in now." The guard's eyes widened at the mention of Ian's name, and he scrambled back to the phone. Ian rolled up his window and put his hands on the steering wheel, gripping it like a lifeline. "It's good to have your name sometimes," Rafe said, though Ian could hear and sense the underlying anger and fear. "My name fucks us over more times than it helps, it seems, but I'm done worrying about what others think. This man is going to know he crossed the wrong family, the wrong people. Then we're going to go to Sassy, get down on our knees, and beg for her to come back because I'm through waiting." Rafe snorted. "Sounds like a plan. Easy, concise, and full of what the fuck." The gate opened, and Ian pulled through. A butler walked out of the front door and nodded toward them as Ian parked in front of the colossal house. Where Ian had chose to live in a modest loft and was planning on buying a bigger home for the three of them, Donald's home was a fucking monstrosity that screamed wealth and privilege. Just one more thing Ian couldn't stand about the bastard. The place dripped money, yet looked cheap at the same time. Sassy had more class in her little finger than the entire place and the people who lived there combined. Ian and Rafe walked through the place, and Ian had a grin at what they were wearing. Instead of his usual suit, he had on jeans and a t-shirt, while Rafe still had his work coveralls on. Their current wardrobe choices weren't particularly power-driven, but they would work for what Ian had in mind. Ian could pull off power and absolute control in a suit at the drop of a hat, but even in the jeans and t-shirt, he managed to convey a dangerous anger and the power to back it up. He left no doubt that he would obliterate the man who tried to crush his own daughter. "Well, good afternoon, Ian. I wondered when you'd drop by for a visit." Donald walked through the archway into the foyer and blinked at their attire before looking like he flicked them off like a piece of lint. Good. Bordeaux had made the first mistake in a power play, underestimating your opponent. "You're a fucking asshole," Ian growled. Donald's perfect eyebrows rose. "Such an attitude from a man who is standing in my home in ragged clothes beside a man who must be your mechanic. Or is that your lover?" "Stop it with the archetypes," Ian spat. "You leak Sassy's name to the press." Though it wasn't a question, Donald answered anyway. "That little bitch thought she could come back to New Orleans and defile our name? Fuck her." Ian's body moved before his brain could engage. His fist slammed into the bastard's face, and Donald went down, hard. "Well, I could have done that," Rafe said dryly. Ian shrugged. "You get the next one." "Gee, thanks." "You bastard!" Donald scrambled to his feet, clutching his obviously broken, very bloody nose. "You'll pay for that." "No, I won't. You'll back off from Sassy. You'll publish a detailed retraction and an apology. You'll stay away from Sassy, Rafe, and me. You'll stay away from the families we've made. You will back the fuck off." "And just why do you think I'll do that?" Ian leaned in so he was inches from Donald's face. Because while you have a few dollars, I have billions. While you have some power in New Orleans, I have more everywhere else. And even if my relationship takes me out of the forefront of my company, I still have everything else. You have nothing. You come at me and what's mine again, and I will destroy you utterly and thoroughly. Donald paled a bit, the truth hitting home. Rafe slid up to Ian's side and gripped the man's chin with bruising force. And what Ian can't get to, I can. You think I'm gutter trash? You haven't got the first clue, asshat. Oh, and for the record, Sassy's been here all along. Your daughter has hidden in her own city for over 10 fucking years, and you never noticed, until you thought it could help your masquerade as the poor victim. Well, fuck you, and fuck the morals you think you have. Stay away from her, or I'll hunt you down like the swine you are. Do you get us? Rafe asked, and Donald nodded. Ian pushed the man away, then strode out of the house. You drive to Sassy's. I need to make a few calls. He'd ensure Sassy's future, regardless of cost or consequence. He had the money, the privilege, and the connections. He'd just make a few calls to those he'd worked with, and they'd have so many eyes on Donald, he wouldn't be able to scratch his ass without an audience. Sassy was more important than anything he could ever lose. You really think she'll be there? Rafe asked as they drove. Ian ran a hand through his hair. It's a place to start. I'm not giving up until we find her. No shit, Rafe snorted. I can't believe you punched her dad. She's gonna be pissed. No, she's going to be annoyed she missed it. That's what I meant. Ian smiled and put his hand on Rafe's knee, needing the connection. God, Sassy had walked out on them. With everything that had happened, it still hadn't clicked that she'd left them. They parked at Sassy's place and got out. They each had a key, and rather than knock and wait for her not to answer, they walked in, unprepared for the sight that greeted them. Sassy sat in the middle of her L-shaped couch, her face pale, tear stains on her cheeks, her eyes vacant. Oh, sweet Jesus, Ian whispered, then hurried to her. She just looked at him and closed her eyes. I ran away. How stupid am I? Rafe came to the other side and pulled them both close. That's not stupid. It was a knee-jerk reaction, apparently, and then I spent the day crying and wanting my boyfriends. God, I'm a fucking teenager. Ian took Sassy's chin between his fingers and forced her gaze to his. Stop it. You're not a teenager. You're allowed to cry and fight and act however the hell you want when someone who you are supposed to trust, someone who is supposed to love you, betrays you. She licked her lips and pulled back. So it was my father then. I didn't figure it out until after I left you. Honey, you were thinking about the pain and others, not about who could have caused it, Rafe said. You aren't required to be all things to all people all at once. What did you do? Sassy asked. Ian blushed. Oh my God, you went to him. Without me? Rafe glared at Ian, but Ian knew he'd have to roll with it. Yes, this first time. Next time we go over there to confront him, you'll lead the charge. I promise we didn't go over there to act like Neanderthals. Rafe coughed. Sassy looked between them, and then at Ian's swollen knuckles. You hit him, didn't you? Oh my God, I missed it? She punched him in the shoulder, and Ian was relieved to see the color back in her face. I can't believe I missed Ian Steele punching my dad. I'll do it again just so you can watch. Sassy smiled like he hoped she would, and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him down for a kiss. He obliged, missing the feel of her beneath him. She pulled away and did the same to Rafe before hitting them in the arms again.
Don't handle my problems.
Hey, they were our problems too, Rafe said. I told your dad to fix it in the media, or I'd make life tough for him. You know I can do that.
Her eyes widened. Ian, but what about your company? What about Rafe's family? What about Midnight? It's not all about that one article. We could hurt a lot of people.
Ian narrowed his eyes. How? How could we do that? The only people we care about love us and support our relationship. Nothing else matters.
But Ian...
Sassy, it will be okay, Rafe interrupted. My family can handle it. They already knew things might get iffy for a bit at the shop if people start to care. But they don't. Not really. And if things change, then I can take a back seat and let my brother and father take care of things. My family isn't going to leave me, and our shop won't go under because of who I love. And my company and its people are financially secure. That won't be an issue. It's in right now to be different in certain circles, and I can use that if I need to. Those people I trust aren't going to leave me because of who I love. As for my parents, they don't like me as it is, Sass. Nothing I do will change that, and I don't really care to. You're my family now. You and Rafe.
Her eyes filled, and she blinked quickly. I'm not going to cry again. I cried enough for the day.
Ian cupped her face. Okay then. Now about that last part, about Midnight. You made that family at the shop, and those people fucking love you. They stand strong no matter what happens around them. There's even a fucking threesome in the group as it is. I think we'll be fine.
Sassy blushed. Okay, so I was reaching with that one.
Stop fighting us, Sassy, Rafe whispered. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to take a chance, Ian added. Take a chance on us, Sass. Take a chance on our future.
She bit her lip and blinked up at him. I promise not to run away again. I'm in. I'm sorry I ran.
Ian shook his head. I'm going to spank that pretty ass Pink for scaring me like that, but I believe you, baby. You're allowed to get fucking pissed at what you read, but we'll handle it together. That's what we're here for, Rafe whispered. Sassy pulled Ian down for a kiss, her tongue brushing his, and he moaned.
Love me,
she whispered against his lips. Always, he answered.
Take me to the bedroom,
Sassy demanded, and Ian nipped at her lip. I thought I was the alpha one. She rolled her eyes.
If you two don't know by now that I call the shots, there's really no hope for you.
Rafe stood, bringing Sassy to her feet. We'll see about that. He picked her up and carried her to the bedroom as she squeaked. Ian took a deep breath and smiled. Finally, she was theirs. He stripped off his shirt and pants as he made his way into the bedroom, not at all surprised that Sassy was already naked and Rafe was between her legs, licking that sweet pussy of hers. Her hands were tangled in Rafe's hair, and she grinned at him.
Told you,
she whispered. Really? You're in control? Rafe asked, then pumped 3 fingers into her heat, and she bucked against him. Pass me the lube, Ian. Ian chuckled and got the bottle and a few condoms from the nightstand. He squeezed a few drops on Rafe's hand and cupped his dick as he watched Rafe fuck her ass with his finger, nice and slow. See? I'm totally in charge, Rafe mumbled against her thigh.
You win,
Sassy gasped. No, I win, Ian murmured as he stood behind Rafe and dipped his own lubed finger between his cheeks. Holy shit, that's cold, Rafe shouted. I'll warm you up, Ian promised. He rimmed Rafe's hole with his finger, then slowly pressed against it, the feel of the tight ring of muscles intoxicating. He couldn't wait to feel it around his dick. That feels so good, Rafe moaned.
I know exactly what you mean,
Sassy panted beneath Rafe. Ian worked Rafe until he knew he was ready. He slowly rubbed small circles over Rafe's prostate as his lover shuddered. Don't do that yet. Fuck. I'm going to come and I'm not even in Sassy yet. Then saddle up, Ian teased.
Did you just compare me to a, oh my fucking god, that feels good?
Sassy screamed as Rafe slid into her pussy. Ian gripped Rafe's hips to steady him. Let me know if I need to go slower, he said, then pressed the crown of his condom-covered cock at Rafe's entrance. He pushed, the pressure giving way as he slid past that tight ring. Both men and Sassy moaned as Ian moved. Inch by inch, he sank into Rafe's ass, the tight feeling so fucking hot, he knew he'd have to be careful, or he'd come right then. Finally, at fucking last, he was balls deep and ready to move. Ready? Ian gritted out.
Ready,
Sassy and Rafe yelled together. Ian pulled out, the motion forcing Rafe to move back as well, his own cock deep in Sassy. Ian set the pace, each thrust thereby thrusting inside of Sassy. He pushed hard, his balls tightening as he forced himself not to come. Sassy writhed under them, her fingers digging into Ian's arms. He loved that she was touching him as well, connecting them in body, soul, and future.
I'm going to come,
Sassy breathed, and then her body flushed, her nipples darkening as Rafe leaned back to rest his head on Ian's shoulder. Rafe pounded into her, and Ian pushed the man down on top of her so he could do the same. Rafe shouted, his ass tightening around Ian's cock as he came, and Ian followed soon after, his body going lax as he filled his partner's ass inside the condom. Ian pulled out, then laid on the bed beside Sassy with Rafe lying on her other side. They rested there for a few moments before each man got up, took care of their condoms, then came with warm, wet towels. They took turns cleaning Sassy and each other up before throwing the towels near the hamper and lying back down on either side of their woman. I've missed that, Ian panted. God, I've missed that. Sassy laughed between them and patted both of their chests.
Next time, I get to be the creamy center of our cookie. Then Ian can be. We'll switch it up.
Ian closed his eyes. I think I need a nap first. Rafe snorted. You're getting old, man. Sassy reached down and cupped him, his dick hardening.
Nah, you're both getting hard at just one touch. But don't worry, I'll let you rest. We're not going anywhere.
Ian turned on his side so he could look down at them both. Never, Sassy. I'm not leaving you. I love you both. Rafe turned as well. I love you both too. Tears filled her eyes, and she smiled.
Happy tears, I promise. I love you both so fucking much. So fucking much.
Ian let out a breath and took her mouth. That's what he'd waited to hear, and knew that no matter what had happened, what would happen, as long as they had those words, they'd be fine. They'd be better than fine. They were together again. Finally. Epilogue.
Yes, Ian, darling, getting a tattoo hurts. Suck it up,
Sassy teased. She laid on her stomach as Shep inked her ass with the same tattoo Khalif was putting on Rafe. And Austin, their guest artist for the time being, drew on Ian, while Rafe was smiling as Khalif inked their tattoo on his lower hip. Ian kept closing his eyes and gritting his teeth. "What's the matter, dude? Don't like someone touching your ass?" Khalif snorted. "I have a preference for who touches my ass, thank you very much," Ian gritted out. Austin threw his head back and laughed. "I'm touched that you're letting me ink you then. I know your ass belongs to Rafe and Sassy. I promise to leave your dignity intact." "Fuck you," Ian mumbled. "I think we just said I wasn't going to do that, bro. But thanks anyway. And you have this whole piece on your back. You'd have thought you'd already be used to ink." Ian let out a breath. "I'm relaxed, I promise. I just don't like seeing Sassy wince." Sassy grinned as the men let out a collective aw. "That's sweet, baby. Yeah, it hurts, but it's okay. Shep's hands are magic." "They better not be too good with the magic," Rafe pointed out. "Fuck you, Chavez," Shep said, and flipped him off. "Don't let Shay hear you say that, or she'll kick you in the nuts."
"And since I like his nuts, I'll be sure to keep him from acting like an idiot," Sassy put in. "How's it looking?"
Shep grunted. She knew he didn't like talking about how his work looked until it was done. He was temperamental that way. Between him, her men, and Austin and Khalif, they'd come up with a design that would work for the three of them. They'd finally found something small but perfect. It was a ring of fire interlocking with a ring of ice encircling a red lily in the center. It was mostly black with subtle color shading so red really stood out, and Sassy freaking loved it. It was perfect for them. They wanted the ink because, after all, it's what Rafe and Ian had come in for in the first place. Now she was part of it. And because they weren't planning on a wedding until they could work out the details of their own lives and the legalities of it, the ink would represent their promises, their devotion. She turned to look at her men as they got their ink and smiled. Her second life began at Midnight Ink, and she'd never forget that. Her second chance at a true happily ever after walked through Midnight's doors 10 years later. They were 3 in 1, united and loved. They were reunited and yet still themselves. There really wasn't anything else in the world she could have wanted. Midnight Ink had given her love, life, and happiness. Rafe and Ian were her center. This was her future. After all, the Sassy always knows best. This has been Ink Reunited, a Midnight Ink novella, Montgomery, Inc. Written by Carrie Ann Ryan. Narrated by Gregory Salinas. Copyright 2014 by Carrie Ann Ryan. Production copyright 2014 by Carrie Ann Ryan.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.